Hi, everybody. It's the Murder Pike Show, starring Murder Pike. We're waiting for the great Achilles.
Yeah, I decided just to go ahead and go live, really for no reason except for the fact that we had people waiting. Achilles is not here yet, but we are expecting him to show up. So this is not really a teaching. I don't have anything prepared. This is a conversation that Achilles wanted to have with me concerning my views on Darwinian theory and to what extent I believe it or don't believe it and how I think it interacts with the scriptures theologically. And so I think he just kind of wanted to pick my brain a little bit. So we're just kind of here waiting. So if you guys have any questions on Darwinian theory or religion as it relates to it, then please ask them, and I'll try to address those while we wait.
I have
And
a
I'll also
question.
drink this giant Coke from Whataburger.
That's Coca Cola?
It is. It is indeed.
Oh. Is that big in the South?
Yeah, it's pretty much big everywhere, I think.
Oh, Murder Pike. Uh, do you believe that humans take form of sinful flesh, have common ancestors with apes?
That's an interesting way to word that question. I do not believe that human beings are related to apes, but the word related means common ancestry. Um, a lot of times geneticists use the word related simply to refer to a percentage of genome that is shared, but even in that it is assumed that there's common ancestry. So the word related means common ancestry. I do not believe that human beings have common ancestry with apes. I think that's what you're asking.
Well, do you believe humans are apes?
Well, anatomically we're apes. I mean, the word ape has morphological classifications that we meet. So we are apes by definition. But I do not believe that Homo sapiens are related or share common ancestry with other major primates and things like that. I mean, the word ape is just a biological classification based on certain traits, and we do meet that criteria.
What about fish?
Fish are not apes.
No,
They're
humans
fish.
are fish?
What?
Yeah, I heard this guy PC Myers says humans are fish. Is that true?
um, People who believe in universal common ancestry believe that all reptiles and mammals are fish because they believe that all modern terrestrial species of the macroscopic level are from fish originally. So the idea in like neo-Darwinianism is that there were fish that sort of morphed into the first amphibians, and those amphibians gave rise to reptiles, which eventually gave rise to mammals. So to say that we are fish is not the same thing as saying that we're apes. To say that we are fish is a like a hypothetical belief. To think that all reptiles and mammals originally came from fish, but to say that we are apes is simply based on certain morphological classifications that we meet.
Oh, uh, I have a question. What do you think that this people don't mind saying that humans are fish, but have a problem with the Bible calling whales fish? What do you think of that?
I think the word whale didn't exist when that scripture was written.
Oh. Yeah, because why is it okay to call human fish but not whales?
That is a nonsensical question, Logan.
Yeah.
In those days, everything that lived in the water was referred to as fish. They didn't understand uh, morphological classification to identify how different marine mammals were from sharks and things like that. So when they said great fish, all they were saying in their terminology was great sea dwelling creature.
Oh. What about uh? Does the Bible say that witches are people who do drugs?
No.
Oh, you sure?
Yeah.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I. Oh,
I don't mind calling whales fish, at least in the same sense that humans are fish. I don't think that those words arranged in that order carry with them any meaning. So I'm not sure how to respond to that.
oh. Yeah. They say whales are not fish; they're mammals. You could say same thing about humans, but they don't mind calling humans fish.
Oh, now I see your point. That's actually rather a good point, Logan.
Yeah, yeah. I just can't help. That's what I thought. I thought that the
I hadn't seen it in the light that you were trying to explain it
Achilles. You
until
said
right then.
that's a good question. Do you identify as a fish?
I've never identified as anything. I don't think that us identifying as something affects what we actually are.
Oh, okay. What if you? Oh, so you believe humans are special creation? Oh, this is what Phantom said.
Now that's a terrific question, Phantom. That is a good question. I believe in especially created categories of life, and I believe that everything within those categories is related or could be related. I retain the right to believe they could be related. So the book of Genesis in the early chapters gives us just a handful of categories of life, the created kinds, fowl of the air, fish of the sea, creeping thing, etc. There's not very many that are listed. There's just a handful. And I believe that everything that exists within one of those overarching categories that the Bible calls kinds retain the right to possibly be related. But I don't believe there is relation or ancestry between the created kinds. So most young earth creationists and most creationists in general use the word kind sort of synonymous with the word species, which is very erroneous. The Bible never uses it with that kind of specificity. It uses it as sort of an overarching category of life. So I do believe in the created kinds, but they're very, very broad. They're these categories of life. And there's many, many species and many, many variations that exist within these kinds, obviously. And I believe that Darwinian principles are true within those kinds.
Oh, so kind.
Yeah, I don't believe the way that many creationists do that kind is anything akin to species. I think it's very obvious that that's not true.
Oh, are you very kind?
I should be kinder, probably.
Oh no, the
I'm so sorry. I'm I'm
Hey,
so
great one has the problem.
so sorry, guys.
That's all
I
right.
tried
Forgive you.
my best to be here
that's
on
all right,
time.
buddy. I had to reschedule it late too. I don't feel bad at you.
Not and no, I do. Because I'm trying not to be late.
No,
There's
you're all
one
right.
thing that Brit did well. It's being on time. I'm trying to be that.
You're all right. We're happy to have you.
Let me try to put that picture on. No, um, video because I don't use VStream, and now it's video resolution. No, shortcuts, virtual background. We don't want virtual. And where is the edit avatar thing? Where should it be? It was there at the beginning, but I decided to log in first and look for it later. I found it. Good. Change avatar. Right. Because the verse appears there, and I want people to know why I have this username. I didn't come up with it. So how's everyone today?
Doing good. How are
Good.
you?
Oh, good. Yeah, that's me now.
Yeah.
It's so small, people can't read it anyway. Full screen, please. I'm kidding. Give me 1 minute to get my coffee at 1 a.m., 2 a.m. Yeah, I have it ready. Mind, word, species, genus, family. Okay, I'm coming right back.
Phantom, I'm going to address that question, but let me get with Achilles and kind of get the conversation started. I was only taking questions early while we waited on him to get here, but I'm going to have the conversation with him, and then any unanswered questions at the end of our dialogue, I'm going to get back to the questions. So if you don't mind, I'll try to circle back around to that. I just want to give him a chance to get started now that he's here. But yeah, I don't know exactly if I would to give you a short answer. I don't know if I would align it with any of the existing tiers of the Linnaean system, but it's obviously much broader than species. I got so many mosquitoes around me.
Claude's here. He's
Hello,
in the
Claude.
comments.
Greetings and salutations. Deviant says that you sound like an old bag of wind.
Me? I always do. Can you guys hear me? All right.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
right. Achilles has a drive.
Ah, a long day of streams. I'm running out of saliva. I'm refreshing it.
I've been driving all day, and I climbed a mountain today, so I'm very
Oh,
tired. So you should win this if it's a debate.
Oh,
it's not debate.
did you do what Kent said? Bring a telescope, look all around. See,
I did not bring a telescope because they have telescopes up there, but really it's pretty cool because when you get to the top of it, you can see the whole Atlanta skyline and you can see the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Georgia, so it's very nice.
So
did
you
you?
climbed all the way to the top?
Yeah, it's a small mountain. It's called Stone Mountain. It's just outside of Atlanta. And as I was passing, I preached all weekend in South Georgia, and as I was coming back through Atlanta, the fellow who was riding with me had never climbed Stone Mountain, so we pulled in there on a whim and just climbed it.
Whoa.
And what do you mean by climbing? Can you define
It's
it?
one side of the mountain is a lot more sloped than the other side, so they've
Uh-huh.
created a trail that you can sort of hike up to the top of it.
Mhm. Okay, so you actually were hiking. It's not with a car that we went all
No,
the way up.
hiking, yeah, hiking.
Hiking.
Yeah.
Okay. Is it hot there?
It is, but we had quite a bit of cloud cover today, which was nice.
That was good. Because hiking under the sun in July, mid-July, can get very nasty
That's
real
that's actually the reason that I put it off because we were going to meet at 6 my time, and I put it off to 6:45 because he and I pulled into Stone Mountain last minute and just decided to climb it.
Wow. Did you?
Um,
Oh,
reminds me of an experience. I've been doing a lot of riding in my life, and it's not very rare to find myself in very bad situations inside a mountain. So one day we decided with a friend that we're gonna try this new trail that we've never seen before, and it was hell, literally. Like it just didn't have the sign "Welcome to Hell." So we started going down a
I don't
river.
know that hell has the sign. I don't know if they do things that way.
Yeah, and we kept going down a river, and I started having a headache. It was summer. We did not expect to be out for so long until like that time. I started having a headache. And when you have a headache and you're on a dirt bike and you have to climb back the river that you were climbing down from, it is pretty rough. Can tell you that, right? So at some point, I feel like we're not gonna make this, and I say, God, please help. We're having a problem here. I didn't manage to finish my sentence, and I hear something in the bushes, and there are two people coming out of another trail,
Yeah.
and I said, "Oh my God, I'm so happy to see you guys. Where are we?" They're like, "Oh, you are between this place and that place and that place." I'm like, "Please tell me that the way to get out of here is not to go all the way back." They said, "No, of course not. Right behind that tree, there is a straight line and you get out, you're out of here." They showed us where to go. And I was so ecstatic about that. And then I said, "Please tell me you also have some painkiller on you." And he said, "Oh yeah, sure, I do." And they even had painkillers. I mean, if you're not a believer at that time, you become a believer.
I need a painkiller for my feet after. Look, I went down there to minister this weekend at the church in South Georgia. I had to do 3 services over the weekend. So I went down there and I took a very nice pair of dress boots to wear for the services. And then I took my old work boots just to wear in case I had to get out in the mud. But I did not take a pair of hiking shoes.
Hmm.
So when we climbed that mountain, I had 10 and a half Wolverine pullovers on my feet.
Oh,
Man, my feet are not feeling good.
oh man, how could you do that?
I
How,
guess
how,
let's get on
are
topic,
you all right?
Achilles, if you don't mind.
oh yeah.
I'll let you go ahead and start us off because
Sorry.
I think this was set up as more of you questioning me and kind of interviewing me on the subject. So, what are some things? What are some things that you feel are unanswered in your mind about my position on this?
So first off, let's tell people how this started.
Sure.
We were backstage. We were discussing different stuff, and at some point, this topic came up, and Christian told me that the theistic evolution that I think that he believes in, it's not exactly the way it actually is, and I'm misrepresenting him when I'm, and I probably am if it's not right. So I started asking, and he kept telling me, and I was responding to that. And at some point, I said, you know what? Why don't we just go public about it and do it public?
Yeah.
And that's it. I'm trying to understand not only Christian's perspective, but any other theistic evolution perspective that I don't know of, because I only understand one, and it doesn't make sense to my ears.
Okay.
So I have not planned any question. And by the way, I don't know if you guys have noticed, I've been trying to make a Revelation show.
Yeah,
Uh,
I've noticed actually.
and postponing it. This is the second day I'm postponing it for tomorrow again,
Why have you been postponing it?
because I've been that busy talking, backstaging. I also joined in Missing Mode show today. Stayed there for 2 hours. So the whole thing is that the last thing I did is to sit down and make specific questions for Christian Pike.
No, I understand. Look, I was gonna try to come with some notes and things, and I just wound up climbing a freaking mountain today. So
Good.
I
Yeah,
had
good.
many notes.
Well, it's similar. I feel like I've been climbing a whole mountain from both sides. So, but we're close to the top. That's good.
Yep.
So if I were to come up with a question, is I know that our Bible and Genesis, I did not believe in it as I do now when I was younger. I considered it fairy tales. When I grew up in faith and started realizing that this is actually the truth that makes sense, I started seeing a lot of literal interpretation of everything inside the Bible, especially creation. And uh, that's where I started seeing that the narrative I was growing up with, that things started randomly and for no reason, and we started from nothing, going to nothing, and for nothing, is actually a satanic lie. Because I was created. I don't want to say I was brilliantly created. I will say, Christian, you are brilliantly created by a God that knows what he's doing, and he has a plan for your life from its beginning to the end. And that goes all the way back to creation, to Abraham, and all the way to the future, because he's all knowing and he's everywhere. So where is that line of, because I have to turn this into a question, of what parts of evolution do align with your understanding of Genesis? Let's not talk about like the gospel, but Genesis, the creation. Which parts do you think somebody who is a certified pastor also sees a union between those two theories? Because I see them as polar opposites. And I leave it at that for your thoughts.
I think I understand the question. Okay, so I am like you. I am a literal Genesis creationist. I also believe in the literal account of Genesis. Now, I acknowledge that it is a very, very short and sweet version of whatever must have happened, but I believe that it is defining or describing in very short and brief terminology the accounts of creation. And so in the book of Genesis, when it speaks of created kinds, it uses the word kinds in the English translation. Those kinds, I feel, by creationists and by YEC proponents and stuff, have been often very misrepresented to be something akin to species. But that's not what it describes. It describes broad categories of biological life. It describes the creeping thing kind, the fowl of the air kind, the beast of the field kind, the fish of the sea kind. It never describes the South Sudan swan kind or the speckled giraffe kind. It's never anything close to that specific. And so when people say things like the fox squirrel kind, that is a misuse of the word kind. The word kind in the book of Genesis describes these broad categories of created life. It does not describe individual species. And so to me, the only line as far as universal ancestry that a Christian must believe in is the line between kinds. If something is in the fish of the sea kind and something else is in the creeping thing kind, those two things do not share common ancestry because they belong to two separate categories of created life called kinds. But everything within those categories is subject to the Darwinian principles. And we have observed the Darwinian principles that they are true. And so the only way to reconcile that is to say that everything within those categories has the potential of relation.
Okay, I should take a pen here, but that's very hard for me to find a pen. I don't use pens since computers were created.
Okay.
I'm looking around my desk because right now I had like 3 points I wanted to touch on that. But for now, until I find myself a pen, I will go from memory. I remember 2 for sure. So the first one is that in our biology books, I'm not in the States, but I've also had American studies, so I know what is getting taught in the United States, at least on the university level. But then I found out that it also happens in schools. This word species gets used a lot, but in the Greek biology books, the word species does not exist. The word kind exists, and it comes from the word ethos, which can be translated both to kind and species. It's like the same word, and in the States you can have both words translated to the same Greek word. So here there is an introduction of a new term that is trying to replace the word kind. There is above the word kind another word that describes the family, and that you have exactly the same. It's genome, I think.
Genus.
And it speaks genus.
Yeah.
And it speaks of the family of animals. So that is the word that should be in the Bible if it was referring to what you are referring.
Well, the only issue I have with that, Achilles, is the word kind comes from the part of the Bible that was translated from Hebrew, not from Greek.
Yes, but Hebrews are known for the Bible. Greeks are known for science. And here in schools, we teach kind. We don't teach species.
Well, what I was saying was I don't know how you guys are using the word kind, but it may not be the same way that the authors of Genesis were using it, because the authors of Genesis never gave it that kind of specificity. They only ever used it for these very broad categories of biology.
But the creation account speaks of every kind of the air. So that doesn't mean the kinds of everything in the air is one kind. It mentions all the kinds of animals that are creeping, those that are in the sea. So I see a distinction there. The fish does not share a common ancestor with the octopus.
Well, I started out with conceding that anything between the categories of kind, whatever that line may be, that anything between those categories cannot share ancestry. I conceded that a minute ago.
I thought you said that they can. I didn't hear the can.
No, the barriers that are set in the scriptures are kind. So like the examples that were given, for instance, are like fish of the sea, creeping thing, fowl of the air, etc. So whatever barrier exists in biological limitation can only exist between those categories of life that we call kinds. So anything within those kinds, anything within the broad overarching category of, say, fish of the sea, is being acted upon by the Darwinian principles. The only limitation for those principles is between these categories that we call kinds.
Okay. I can now add the second point that I had. I think you responded to this, so let me get to the second one, which I think relates, is that we have some mechanisms that we observe that they exist, and the interpretation of them changes according to the to what we want to, what our theory is. So the fact by itself does not support. It can be seen by both sides, right? Like we know that Darwinian mechanisms have been named by Darwin, but they existed before him. So he named them.
Discovered them, yeah.
Right. So there are parts in there that are necessary, and natural selection, I'll bring that up as an example, is it exists. So he pointed it out, and we called it a Darwinian mechanism, but that mechanism existed since the beginning.
Of course, yeah, he only discovered it, sure.
Right. So they are using this to say that since natural selection exists, therefore evolution. And that is a very big stretch.
Let me ask you a question. How do you define evolution? Like, in your mind, where do you feel that the microscopic scale becomes the macroscopic scale?
You just complicated it by a degree of 1,000 at the end with the microscopic and the macroscopic.
I didn't mean to. That's the kind of terminology I hear people use a lot of times. Like, they'll say, I believe in micro evolution, but not macro evolution. So
that's what you mean. Okay, because I went all the way from the microcosm to the cosmos.
No, I simply meant like macroscopic morphological change.
Okay, so there are differences that happen due to environmental conditions for the animal to survive. And I'll say animal, so we don't get mixed up with species and kind, right? Any animal, if it gets, if a dog gives birth to 20 dogs, the one dog that has more fur is going to be the one that survives in a cold climate. Therefore, that's the one that is going to produce offspring. The others are going to die. And that means that the genes that created the fur are going to continue on the next birth. So if you look at this 1,000 years later, you will see that the dogs in the North Pole are the, those with the big fur, because that's how they survive there. So that mechanism exists for the survivability of the animal, any given animal.
Sure.
That doesn't mean that if we go way back in time, that animal was a different animal. That's where I draw the line. So microevolution.
When people in like the intelligentsia, when people in academia use the word evolution in academic speech, they're referring to what you just described. Now, when people say the theory of evolution, especially in the light of genetics and stuff, yes, there's a lot of assumption that goes along with that term. But the word evolution in the academic sense is simply a word that is a placeholder for the mechanism that you just described. So when you say you don't believe in evolution, what you're saying is that you don't believe in the theory of evolution, because only you guys use evolution, the word, in that sense. People in academia don't use it that way.
No, well, that is exactly what you're saying is because you said you people, so I'm going to say
creationists, yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to say our point then is that this is exactly what they are doing wrong. because they have something that is observable, they are making assumptions and creating a whole theory out of it. And as you said, they are assumptions. And we do not have the intermediary steps that we believe that they hold somewhere. I actually was reading something. Give me a second. I hope this is going to be an easy way to find this quote, because I happen to find it in a book. Admitted by a very strong name in the science field, that we have a very big gap in fossils, and we assume what exists in between. And I'm looking for the quote as I'm speaking, trying to fill up here. So that is where the problem is, because I observe some things, and they observe the same things, and I say that God created them, and I admit that that is a religion. But they are saying that God cannot have created them. They all go back to a common ancestor, which, if goes further back, was a single-celled organism. And they don't say that that too is a religion. And it is a religion. If you don't have the evidence for it, it's still a religion. At least our side admits it.
But
And I'm
that's
sure
the
you've heard that argument
line.
before. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, that doesn't really answer the question of where and why you determine that line to be where it is. Like, let me walk you through an example. I'm not sure if you will feel the same way that Ken Ham does about this, but on the Ark Encounter, they have an exhibit of a creature called Myohippus, which is, if I remember correctly, I think it's a three-toed ungulate. And Myohippus is one of the ancestors of modern horses, donkeys, and zebras, which are one-toed ungulates.
Mm-hmm.
So the people who created the Ark Encounter seem to believe that this animal with three toes and a flatter foot has given rise to these animals with one toe and a higher foot. Do you agree with that? Do you believe that Myohippus is the ancestor of modern one-toed ungulates?
100%.
Okay, that is macroscopic change.
No, it is a microscopic change.
You think that a foot completely morphologically transforming is microscopic change?
It is still a horse.
No, it's not.
It is.
It's not.
It just
It has
has
3 toes, Achilles.
Yeah, well, if
I had a whole generation that I gave rise to of human beings that had one toe and a foot that was hiked up like this, would you call those human beings?
Well,
Macroscopic change.
statistically, from 3 to 1, go from 10 to 1 or 2, we're talking about a much bigger difference. But I think you are evading the obvious. Maybe it did not need the 3 fingers. And slowly they changed to 1.
That's called evolution.
But the horse remained the horse. But according to the theory of evolution, you have other animals that started from a whale, they became cows. So where is the line that you are drawing?
Achilles, I want to just go back to this example for the sake of the audience. Myohippus is a 3-toed ungulate, if my memory serves me correctly, with a flatter foot than modern horses. And the ancestors of Myohippus are 5-toed ungulates with a flatter foot than that. And the most predominant YEC organization in the world concedes that modern 1-toed ungulates with hiked up feet descended from 3-toed ungulates with flatter feet. The word macroscopic means morphologically observable. And the word microscopic means genetic variation. So if you're not going to define that as evolution, That's just a convenient moving of the goalpost. If my foot did that, you would consider it macroscopic change.
But whether I'm still on my way to understand where you are drawing the line, because this example has been used by what is called the theory, and not just evolution or macro or microevolution, the theory of evolution.
But it's not microevolution, it's macroevolution.
It's, again, I'm going to say this again, macroevolution would be, if you were to go all the way back, it doesn't have 3 or 1 toe instead of 3. It is a different animal. So we found a fossil that is the same animal with a
It's
big
not the same
change.
animal, Achilles.
With a big change.
Horses have 1 toe. That's part of what makes them horses. The reason we don't call Myohippus a horse is because it does not meet the criteria to be called a horse.
I actually remember that there is something about this, and I'm trying to look into it right now, that it has been proven wrong.
But you don't believe in the Myohippus series?
It has been proven that...
the reason because I started out by saying, do you agree with Ken Ham about that?
So first off, it is a very small horse, and that's what Myohippus means. Hippos comes from the word hippos, which is in Greek alogo, for horse, hippos. And Myo, it comes from, I don't know, probably Latin, but it means small horse, and the size that it has does not relate to the horse that we know today. So we are talking about something that is of the size of a dog, a little bigger. It has a completely different tail.
But you're the one saying that it was a horse, Achilles.
I'm sorry?
You said it was still a horse. That was your words.
That was before I just looked into it, because you brought up something and I did not know enough about it. And I'm...
So, well, just for clarification, are you saying that you now no longer believe that it's related to horses?
I actually see that it's a completely different animal that looks a lot like the horse that we know today, but it was a different animal that went extinct.
Okay.
And here it says Myohippus are commonly, Wikipedia, are commonly referred to as the 3-toed horses. Their range was from Alberta, Canada to Florida to California. So it was not a worldwide fossil. I don't even know how many we have found, but it looks like it was one specific breed, and we do not know that this breed gave birth to the breeds that we have today. Because how did they start growing up and become bigger animals?
Well, and that's kind of why I started out by saying, do you agree with Ken Ham that these things have a common ancestor? Because that's sort of the whole conversation around Myohippus is, if you concede that it probably did, then you have to discuss that morphological change. So if you're saying that you don't believe that Myohippus is related to horses, then we probably should just move on to another example, because that sort of defeats the whole purpose.
No, it doesn't relate. Your point was that from that to today, we have an evolution that is too big to be considered microevolution, and it is macroevolution.
Yes.
Right. So what I see in my position being is that it is a completely different kind of horse, and it did not lead to today's horse. But if you want me to take it back, yes, I see a common ancestor. And if you want me to sound like Ken Hovind, it was not something else than a horse. It was a horse.
So do you think it was related, or do you not think it was related?
It might have been related going backwards, but it certainly is not a predecessor of today's horses.
That's what that means, Achilles. That's why I'm asking.
So in a world before humans, the animals were hundreds of thousands of, maybe I should say millions of more species than what we have today.
Do you believe in a world before humans?
before the eruption of humans as it is today, before the flood, the pre-flood world had way more animals. Thank you for correcting that.
No, I'm just trying to understand. That's all.
It had way more animals than what we have today.
Okay, so you, to be clear, you do not accept Myohippus as a predecessor to modern horses.
Well, yes. No.
Okay, so that just makes that example uninteresting for this conversation, because the whole purpose is to discuss an example where change is observed and to get your reaction to that example. So,
well, wait a minute.
I have other examples. That's just one of the better.
Wait a minute. Before you jump to another example, I think I gave
you disqualified the example, not me.
I did not disqualify it. I give you the other alternative to seeing a fact and saying that because that was your original position.
Well, I use that because Ken Ham has it in the Ark encounter.
Even if it was there, the fact that it led to today's horses, that it is this one that leads to today's horses, it is an assumption. They found it somewhere, and he put it in the Ark there. They didn't find it in the Ark. They didn't find it around the Ark.
No, I understand that. I'm just saying that's why
it was found in the United States, and the Ark is at Turkey. So that's not the common ancestor to today's horses.
I understand now that you don't believe that it is. That's the reason that I asked at the beginning of the example, do you agree with Kent Ham that this was the predecessor of modern horses? That's the reason I asked that.
No, but I don't remember. I actually do think that the horses do come from the US. All over the world were imported to the rest of the world from the US. I'm not sure, but still, even if that is the case, because there are a lot of things that the world didn't have before discovering the US. Corn was one of those.
Here's another great example that we can discuss, actually.
If you want to jump to it, yes. Or the other example that you want to bring, but I want to point out that your question here was if that is enough of a micro to macro evolution. And I think that here is an assumption. Just because we have the fossil, we say that this must have been an ancestor, but we don't know if it ever gave birth or if it died without giving birth.
Well, a better question.
We know that it existed, and that is the fact. It existed. That is a fact.
Let me jump in for a second, Achilles.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to make the positive claim that it was or was not, which I respect. None of us know that it was. I'll ask the question in a different way. Do you believe that it is possible for Myohippus to be the ancestor of modern horses?
Mathematically, I would say no, because of the size.
The size?
Yeah, because it is very hard to get from a pony to a normal-sized horse. Like, ponies, right?
Yeah.
If you show me the skeleton of a pony and you tell me that this is the ancestor because we found it that deep, so it must have been the ancestor, it would be very hard for me to believe because of the size.
Do you believe that modern ponies are related to the largest species of horses?
The other way around, yes, I believe that. But from short to tall, it would be hard to convince me.
Are you saying that you don't believe that animals can progressively become much larger than they are?
There are limits, and from a pony to go to a full-fledged horse, I don't know, man. It sounds like a bit of a stretch, literally. If you know what I mean.
That was a good pun. This is a very difficult conversation to have because we have to have an example that we can agree on to discuss.
Yeah, well, the facts are facts. The interpretation of the facts changes. And
You believe there are some species of dogs that have additional toes? Because there's a species of farm dog, a big white shaggy dog, that has a sixth toe. And we know that it's a dog because we're the ones that bred it.
in the same manner, I believe that there are so many sharks with different sets of teeth. That doesn't make them one bringing the other. They are different kinds, and one of them needs
You think there are different kinds of sharks?
yeah, what's the word I should use? Not types, I guess kinds, because the white shark is definitely not the same with the one that crawls at the bottom of the sea, the sand shark. How do you call that? I'm not.
Let me ask this question in a different way that may kind of kickstart the conversation. This may be a better way to approach the subject. Are there any examples in nature that you're aware of that show what you to believe to be the most extreme case of morphological change, or an example of the limits of morphological change?
I want you to redefine that. I'm not sure I understand exactly what line it is. You want me to draw?
I'm trying to think is there any example in nature where you see something that you accept to be an ancestry tier that led to what would be an example of the limits of morphological change within your worldview? Like, because you said you believe there are different kinds of sharks that aren't related. And that is a very narrow definition of kind. That's a very interesting thing to me, because if you don't believe that sharks could be related, then, I mean, you have to believe in speciation to some extent.
Okay, I'll defend that and say that I believe that in creation, first off, the water world has not changed as much as the world above the water from a flood, right? So they had a continuation, but those animals that were on the land, even the birds, had an abrupt stop in the way they were micro-evolving. But the species in the waters, they still had water, right?
Okay.
So I believe that in the world that God created, a lot of different species of the same kind were created for different needs. One is there to eat the other is there to eat the other, and that happened from a brilliant creator who not only designed all that, he made it in a split second.
Okay, so you think that food chains and ecological systems were set up by God?
Yeah, for the most part.
That's an interesting statement. Right. So I would presume that you believe that before the fall of man in the garden, that there was no death, that animals did not eat each other. Is that correct?
Yep.
Then why would there be ecological systems and food chains set up in nature?
After the fall, things changed.
Do you think that God went back and sort of recreated things?
He's telling us in the Bible that now after this, things will be like this and things will be like that. So yes, one of them is that Adam would have to work the earth. Something changed about the earth. Now, I don't know how
changing is not the same thing as him changing the acts of creation.
I'm sorry? Come again?
This is what I'm trying to point out here, is that if you believe that God set up the ecological systems and the food chain, but there were no food chains before the fall, then he would have to go back into the world after creation and readjust creation to account for a new environment. And there's no biblical history of that whatsoever.
What do you mean there? Wait. There is no biblical history
to give the idea that God went back into the earth and changed things after creation.
Well, we have the introduction of death. So before that, there was no eating other species.
Walk me through how you And this, just indulge me a little bit here, because I think we can get around to a good point here. If you think about how the world was before the fall, and then you think about the act of the fall, I want you to walk me through how you think all that got started in nature after the fall.
As quickly as they got created in the first place, as quickly as God can decide to drown everyone with a flood because he despised creation, because after the fall, it went all the way to the point where we became disgusting. He didn't mean the animals, but the introduction of death started changing a lot of things. I imagine the first fish turning around and eating the other fish, because now it starts eating.
That's exactly my point, what you just
Yeah.
said. That's not God creating the system, that's selection creating the system.
Well, I believe in the beginning God, and you believe in the beginning selection.
No, you just said that you believe selection. You said that at that moment, animals started to eat each other, which would have begun the selection process and led to the food chains.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that the selection process started that. It means that somebody clicked his fingers, and that's when that started. It is
Even if that were the case, Achilles, once the fingers were clicked,
I'm sorry?
even if that were the case, once the fingers were clicked, wouldn't that have begun a chain of events that led to ecosystems?
Yes.
That means that selection led to ecosystems.
Well, as brilliantly as it was created before
Well, I
the fall,
credit God with
as
selection.
being-
I'm wondering if you guys do.
as brilliantly as it was at the beginning, equally brilliantly it was when we observe it now. It's still God's hand behind it, but this time death is introduced. It wasn't there before. So I don't know if you want me to go back and imagine how it was. I don't know how Adam could go in the water and name every kind that exists inside the sea, right? So he named everything that was on the ground, unless they appeared in front of him and then jumped in the sea. But there are so many things that I'm waiting to get to heaven to understand. Even if I told you, I will call it an assumption, because right now we are in this assumption cloud when I'm getting asked, how do you believe? And I'm like, maybe that way, but they are maybes, I can be wrong. But how it makes sense to me is that as they got introduced at the beginning to work without death, now the crown was given to Satan and death was introduced. So immediately, in the same magical manner that they got created in the first place, now they changed. And at that moment, selection and natural selection became a mechanism.
Well, see, you and I agree on that. I sort of spoke about that at the beginning of the conversation, which was the boundaries that exist for a Christian are the boundaries between these overarching categories of life that Genesis calls kinds. If a person is going to be a Christian, or a Jew or a Muslim for that matter, but we're speaking about Christians, if a person is going to be a Christian, they must of necessity be a special creationist, because the Bible teaches emphatically special creation. But much like gravity or germ theory or calculus, Darwinian theory is simply a mechanism of nature that man has observed and began to study. So we cannot deny reality, but we can try to find out where it fits into our understanding of the scriptures. And the only place a person really could, in my opinion, fit in what we have discovered about Darwinian theory with the scriptures is that the Darwinian principles are active within the confines of that category called kind. So if you have creeping thing kind, then there is no universal relation between creeping things and other categories of kinds. But within the creeping thing kind, the Darwinian principles are active. So you've already conceded that you believe in natural selection. You've conceded that it's possible that an animal can get a bigger, smaller foot with more or less toes. So at this point, we're just trying to define where you draw that line where the Darwinian principle is no longer true.
I kind of think I've already given that answer, which is that the mechanism implies by itself, just by the word mechanism and the utilization of it, that somebody designed it. And this is where the line is. The line is that Darwin tried to present a world where, according to some things that he saw were happening, he tried to put God out of the equation, because up until that time, everybody believed in creation. And he tried to take people out of creation, and he's not alone. There are people before him.
Achilles, that's got nothing to do with the topic.
100%.
Do you believe in
That is
natural
where the
selection?
problem is. That is where the problem is. The problem is that I have a computer right here next to me, and it runs with ones and zeros. If I start then seeing the ones and zeros and saying, hey, wait a minute, I see these ones and zeros, therefore these ones and zeros must have started the computer. I see the mechanism, and I'm saying that the mechanism created the whole thing. No, the mechanism by itself had to be designed by someone. And the reason it becomes a problem is if they were saying, if in schools, American schools, because I know you've heard a lot about this DVD number 5 of Kent Hovind. I happened to discuss about this recently with someone. What he says in there is that when communists took over China, they did not bring Marxism in the schools. They did not bring the Communistic Manifesto in the schools. They brought evolution in the schools. And then they started slaughtering Christians by 18,000 a month. And the theory of evolution is being taught to the United States. And although you feel like it is
Achilles,
a
I'm not here
capitalistic,
to defend what the United States is teaching. We're talking about what I believe and what you believe.
but this is where the problem comes in, because it is getting taught as science, and it is full of assumptions, and it is a theory. So if I had a country that said, listen, guys, we don't know how it started, all right? So we're going to present to you these two theories, nobody would have a problem with it. But they are not doing that. They are
Achilles, I
deleting.
have no interest in the public school systems. Jesus said, if my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight for it. None of us should be fighting for the kingdoms of this world.
But we're not fighting for the kingdom, but we are fighting for the souls of children
Then preach.
that are getting indoctrinated by the lie that this is science.
But Achilles, you and I are here to discuss what you and I believe. I'm not here to be for or against the school systems.
It's not that I'm turning this to the schools, but you are saying and putting words in my mouth as
I'm
that
not trying to. I'm
we
just trying to
believe
get on subject.
as we believe the same thing, and I'm saying no, we don't.
No, I didn't
because-
make that claim, and I intend to prove that before the conversation is over. I believe you and I believe the same thing.
Okay, so that's what I'm defending. I would not believe the same thing, because the fact of natural selection does not say that there was no designer behind it. It is
But
a
I don't
mechanism.
say that either, Achilles.
So what is it that you are saying?
Let me ask you this, because Charles Darwin did not discover universal ancestry. He
Yeah,
did
we
not.
said that at the beginning. Okay.
Let me finish. Charles Darwin did not discover universal ancestry. He did not discover that all biology hails from the same specimen. What he discovered was the principles of natural selection. You believe in natural selection. Later on, in the light of modern genetics, with Darwinian theory in mind, we discovered that genetic variation is what causes natural selection. You also believe in genetic variation. So in practice, you are a Darwinian.
Well, you can say what you want to say that I
What is
am.
wrong with what I just said? What is incorrect about what I just said?
The fact that I see a brilliant mechanism created by a brilliant creator
I agree with you.
for adoption.
I agree that it is a brilliant mechanism that Charles Darwin discovered that was created by a brilliant creator, same as gravity or germ theory or anything else.
Yeah, let's not get any
Now
jealous.
you're calling it science. Now you're conceding that it is science.
I'm not conceding because I already consider that as part of nature. It exists. I see it. I observe it. But the thing is that what is getting taught is that means that's what um, creates and goes from one species to another species, and that is not science. We have the
Speciation is
we
proven.
have the fact, which is what we discussed about dogs and their fur. But that fact on its own, it's just one small mechanism of the survivability of the dog, because it has to survive if, let's say, the climate changes.
Let me explain something to you, because I think you may be entering into this conversation with a misunderstanding of me. America has a public school system which parents can put their children in free of charge. You understand this?
Greece does too. I guess all the other countries.
I don't put my kids in that school system. I pay money for a different school system, and I come out of pocket for something that could be free because I do not trust the American public school system. So you're not discussing with someone who is on board with the public school system.
Well, the thing is though that when I explain the problem with natural selection and how it leads to the atheistic view of the world, and I mention the public schools, you say don't bring in the public schools. This
Because
is what
I'm not
we're
defending the
discussing.
public schools
And
again.
then when I'm proving to you my point about what the problem is, and they are they're turning a theory into science, you are telling me about the problem that you have with public school systems. No, if you want to actually see where the problem is, we have public schools here too, and when we get biology, we start analyzing the difference between a multi-celled organism, a single-celled organism, everything that cells have, different kinds, different species, but not where they came from. It is the same school. You do not need to pay. It is being paid by taxpayers, but it's not lying to children about the God doesn't exist. It doesn't mention that.
American public
So
schools
what you have over there is religion inserted inside science, and you very well choose not to get your children into that kind of religion, and you choose another school. Yes, but what about those that cannot afford it? Aren't they souls? Aren't those children souls?
Of course.
So I'm not sure. I do know we believe in the same thing. We believe in Jesus Christ dying for our sins. And that is the only faith that should exist. The rest should be science, and it should be observable. So we do agree that there are mechanisms, and Darwin made a book about them. But that book, it does not only focus on the mechanisms.
Have you
Go ahead.
read The Origin of Species, Achilles?
Well, parts of it. It's online.
It's a very
I tried.
difficult book to read.
I know I tried, but it's pretty hard. But I do see his problem with God in the book, and we can have another show where we can go and start reading it from the beginning, because it's publicly available. It's online.
Charles Darwin's, well, the point I was making earlier was Charles Darwin having a chip on his shoulder about religion has no bearing whatsoever on whether he was right or wrong. Either he was right or he was wrong.
Hey, wait. I agree with that, but if you put it in context and you see where he was when it was written and where we are today, and how we are calling him a scientist who had a theological degree, and I'm not even sure if he finished the school, and he had a chip on his shoulder against God, and he created a theory of everything working based on some mechanisms that are observable, but removing God from the equation, the creator of those mechanisms. Don't tell me that he wasn't biased. and it didn't create the whole road that we are today.
Well, I think that everyone's biased, but what we're discussing is the limitation of Darwinian principles. So we're trying, for the sake of the audience, to help clarify what we believe the potential limitations of the Darwinian principles are. My answer to that question is that the only limitation is that which breaches kind as it is used in Genesis, which is a very broad category of life.
Okay, wait. Instead of going into that specific again of kinds with species, let me ask a question. So you believe that, and I don't mean that to sound condescending, like, oh, you believe that,
No, you're
okay?
fine. Go ahead.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that our horses today go back to that horse that we discussed.
Are you asking me if I believe that?
Yeah, kind of going. I'm going to continue by getting a set of yes or no answers from you.
I think it is. I think it is
right?
almost certain. I'm not going to say certain because no one knows for certain, but I think it is very likely that modern one-toed ungulates descended from an animal like Myohippus.
It's certainly uncertain. Just messing with you. Okay.
Well,
So
to be fair, Ken Ham also concedes that.
okay, so we have a different line,
Okay.
and if we take those lines back, do you think they meet?
Only within that kind, which in that case would be cattle or beast of the field.
Horse.
No, horse is not a kind. The Bible's never that specific.
Yeah, but I see a difference between a horse and a cow. They both eat grass, but
Whether or not you see a difference has
you
nothing
don't
to
want to try the milk of a horse.
Achilles. Whether or not you see a difference is irrelevant. We're talking about what the Bible says. The Bible is never that specific about the word kind.
But we are supposed to use our brains.
I've been using mine in this conversation. It's on overdrive.
I'm not sure you're using it though overall, because
Show me in the scriptures where the word kind is that specific. I challenge you to do that.
No, I challenge you to go find a male horse and get its milk and try it.
A male?
Yeah,
What
because
a
that's the only one you're gonna get milk from.
Female horses have milk.
Actually thinking about it, do they?
Yeah, all female mammals have milk.
Okay, so I see a difference between the cow and the horse. Now,
Well, I see a difference between them, but the question is, first off, whether they belong to the same kind, which is a whole conversation in and of itself. I don't know the answer to that. My guess would be yes, but I don't know.
so
and
you say yes would
Well,
be
the
yes.
other question would be, can these two animals potentially be related? Would that violate the scriptures? That's the other question.
I believe yes, that saying that they are would violate the scripture. Not scriptures, but it would violate God's design of different beasts of the field. It's not just one. He didn't create one beast of the field. We know that Adam named them all.
No, but he
So-
referred to beast of the field as a kind.
Yeah, but he didn't say you kind, and then he went to the fish. There were different kinds of
No,
beasts.
that's not true. Fish of the sea was a kind. Whatever Adam named of the fish of the sea was in the kind fish of the sea. That is how the word kind is used.
So you're saying that the cow and the horse had a common ancestor.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if those two
Possibly.
animals belong, I'm saying that if those two animals belong to the same kind, then it is possible for them to be related without violating the scriptures. I'm not saying they are related.
So, okay, but you're not saying this and you're saying that, so I don't know what you're saying. I'm trying to understand, because this is the point of this discussion, to understand where do you draw the line between, that theory and...
Well, I'll tell you this. I think this will make maybe some answers to the question. If you look at the reading of Genesis, you and I seem to disagree about how the word is kind is used. So let's set that to the side for now. I agree with you that there are obviously a plurality of animals created within that kind, that God didn't just create a cow and that was the cow kind. He created many animals that were within that kind that also are not related because they were all created separately. So you and I agree about that.
Good.
But I think what we disagree about is the potential for Darwinian principles to act upon those animals within the confines of their kind, because there is nothing in the scripture that says that animals cannot mutate and change over time. And we
Yeah,
know
no,
observing
we
nature
agree.
can do that.
No, yeah, we agree. I agree there. But still, if you go all the way back, you will find the same animal created, and it's not gonna look like the animal you have today.
Well, that's something that you and I totally agree on, and that's something else that deserves to be said. I was going to ask you that because I ask this to people sometimes when I'm discussing this, is do you believe that species in the world today resemble very closely species in the beginning? Because I do not.
Me neither, because we have fossils of huge insects,
But I'm
right?
just saying, those huge insects, did they go extinct or did they become the smaller insects that we have?
Good question, because if when we find the fossil, we cannot possibly know that if that fossil actually managed to have offspring on any kind, even insects or anything. We
Well,
cannot
we're not
possibly know.
speaking about positive statements. We're speaking
So
about what we believe is possible.
yeah, so there is a chance that according to the changes in the environment after the flood, and there are other theories, people have different theories of what happened and what changed, right? Ken Hovind has the canopy theory. I don't agree with it. I don't like the canopy theory. I think there was something different with the oxygen, because it doesn't make sense that a huge dinosaur with very small nozzles could breathe all the air to fuel its lungs, right? I do see that there are changes in the environment in the pre-flood world and the post-flood world, but not in the canopy theory. I don't see that. So other people have other theories. So there definitely seems to be a difference in the oxygen levels.
Okay.
So that um, when a new, let's say, mosquito is born and the oxygen is 10% lower because it didn't drop from 100 to 20, right? It started changing. Maybe they were a little smaller than the big one, and then they became a little smaller and a little smaller, and they became what they are today. But I insist on the fact that it's just the mosquito line, and it's a
Do you
completely
believe that is
separate and
possible?
parallel line with other lines. They are parallel and they go all the way back to creation or the fall. Because yes,
Those?
because you made a good point that there was another line drawn, which was the fall. It's not all the way back to creation, because the mechanism of eating each other started at the fall. So a lot of the mechanisms that we discover today, they did not exist in the Garden of Eden, but then they started existing.
I
So
agree with that.
that's a good point. I agree
Well,
there too.
I agree with that actually. And you know, you were talking about the line of organisms leading all the way down from the fall to today, and you were saying, if I'm understanding you correctly, you were saying that you think it's possible that, for instance, giant insects over successive generations since the fall could become modern, smaller insects today. That they can, continue in that direction, leading to much smaller insects because of changing environment conditions or whatever. Is
Yeah,
that what you believe?
yeah.
That is what most academics would refer to as evolution. That's what they mean by that word.
Well, first off, I call it de-evolution, because when you are this big hotshot and then you become this tiny little thing that I can squash, I'm not calling that evolution.
Well, I think the principle stands that there was change involved.
Yeah, but I want you to concede with me here that there is an issue, though, when they are trying to say that because of this, then we understand that the dinosaur became the birds.
That's really the meat of the discussion, is where we're putting the limitation, because I think all of us at some level or another accept the Darwinian principles, So what we're trying to do is from a Christian worldview, where do we put that limitation? And like I said earlier, the only place I can think to impose it is between those original categories of created life that Genesis called kinds. I can't think of anywhere else to scripturally impose it. The only thing I can think of, speaking of evolution, that would violate the scriptures would be for common ancestry between kinds, between fish of the sea and fowl of the air, something like that. Anything within those kinds would not violate the Bible. Now, you can say that you don't believe it, but it would not violate the Bible. Anything within the group of fowl of the air being related or giving rise one to another, as long as they don't leave that kind, that would not violate the Bible.
Yes, but still, I agree. I agree. But before I go to the still, there is in every biology, which should be science book, in every level of the American education system, you are going to see the common ancestor going back to the amoeba.
Now, I understand what they teach.
Okay, so this is evil.
I mean, obviously, I don't agree with them. I'm a creationist.
Good. I see the lines being parallel, and they had interruptions. One of them was the fall, and then there was the flood. So I even believe, and may the chat laugh. And by the way, I'm not paying attention to the chat. If I'm as women are accusing us, I can only focus on one thing. And if I can give you my full attention, I cannot.
Women are always accusing us. On this, we agree.
And I cannot focus on the chat. But the chat might laugh with this and any viewer. But I do believe that unicorns could have existed, but they didn't make it to the ark. So
there really isn't any sort of
unicorns.
There's no biological principle that would prevent horse-like animals from having horns. I mean, most people interpret the word unicorn to mean rhino, of course, but there really is no biological principle that would prevent a unicorn from existing. It's a perfectly possible animal.
So one thing I agree, and one thing I would draw the line on what you said, which I agree with. Where I would draw the line is that I do not see the pterodactyl that is a dinosaur of the air. I wanted to use the biblical name, which is of the heaven, because we have three heavens, but the lower one is the sky that we know, but I'm sticking to the sky. The pterodactyl was on the sky, but it did not give birth to the finches.
Well, I don't think that's. I understand the point you're making, but pterosaurs are actually a little bit different than theropods. Mainstream biologists believe that theropod dinosaurs, and specifically dromaeosaurs, are what gave rise to modern birds. Pterosaurs are actually a different lineage, but I understand the point you're making. You don't believe that reptiles gave rise to modern birds.
Yes, because the mutations that you need from one to the other are so many, are in the hundreds of thousands, that there is no way to have them all at the same time, or one after the other, and the animal surviving. It is impossible. And you hear crazy theories being sold for science. And I'm glad we at least don't disagree on that. Because just because I have seen with my own eyes this little fish that once the water goes back due to the tide, it can stay out and stay in the mud. I cannot use that to say that's a common ancestor, and that's how we jumped on this on the earth. And
let me jump in right here at the birds thing, because this is an interesting thing that the audience will probably want to hear about. I'm sure that you're familiar with why scientists believe that dromaeosaurs gave rise to birds.
No, don't be sure. No, don't be sure.
Well, there are certain specimens that were discovered that seem to blur those lines, and then later on there were certain tails that were trapped in amber that seemed to validate that point of view. So, what would you say about something like, let's say, Archaeopteryx? What would you say about Archaeopteryx?
So, I want you to do an assignment for me. I want you to watch Jurassic Park #1. On the first scene, because they wanted to introduce this. The main actor, but the first scene, don't miss it. It's the scene that zooms in to a fossil that we've just discovered, and the whole movie begins. And on the first scene, he says something about birds leading to dinosaurs. I'm sorry, the other way around. Dinosaurs leading to birds. And they didn't focus on that at all. And there was a discussion about this, that although they wanted to push this, they did not have the evidence yet. And the director just added it in, but they didn't focus on it at all. 20 years after that, they discovered this. It wasn't 20 years. I think it was right around the time. And it turned out that the first fossil was faked. But the same magazines that printed out that we found the ancestor to birds, they did not. No, they actually printed it out too, that it was a fake, but on later magazines. And I'm
Okay,
talking
so if I'm
about
understanding you correctly,
science.
are you
Science
saying that
today.
you don't believe that Archaeopteryx is a real animal?
Later on, they started discovering more of those.
There are,
So,
if my memory serves me, there are currently 11 specimens.
so I believe that we have a big narrative of trying to remove God from the equation, and there are always motives behind murders, and they are trying to kill God. And those that are doing that, they have the mechanisms to do it. They can fake something and tell you that don't worry about it, don't look into it. We are the scientists, you are not. And we can give you pictures, but you can never get your hands on the specimen.
Well, I just want to clarify a little bit. Are you saying that you don't believe that Archaeopteryx is a real animal?
I definitely don't know if that is what gave birth to the birds today, but I would say that discovering it in
That's
the
not the question. Do you believe it
but
exists?
discovering it is actually very convenient to the theory. That's what I have to add.
What about things like Microraptor, other animals in the same vein?
Microraptor, which I don't know what it is.
Well,
Sounds
there are
like
several animals that are sort of like the Archaeopteryx that have the same reptilian features as well as bird features. I'm just wondering how you do you just disbelieve that those exist?
I've seen a lot of lies, and I wouldn't want to go into uh, other stuff that they've been lying about, but because I have the certainties of the other lies, I can no longer trust a science that is doing its best to take God out of equation and arrive where we are today. I believe they could have been faked.
Okay.
There,
So
there
is it safe for me to say that you don't believe in animals that blur the lines between dromaeosaurs and birds?
Let me say to that that I just would not believe, even if they are not faked. I do not believe that they could lead to the swallow bird that I see every spring. They are not the same,
So you would think of them as being an individually created kind that just was not related. It just had bird-like features.
and it did not make it. Yes,
Okay, I think I understand. Is
but
that
they
how
are.
you would respond to any species that appeared to be transitional?
I think that we killed all the dinosaurs. Some remain even today. I believe that if you do some research on the Loch Ness lake and monster, you'll see that it's not just a lake. You can fit all mankind in it, all 7 billion of people in it, and it's full of ripples and tunnels.
Are you
And
familiar with environmental DNA? Do you know what that is?
environmental DNA. Let me finish the previous question, and we'll get there.
Okay.
So I think that they had been called dragons, and it was very highly respectable if you could kill one. So people went out every time they would discover one, they would go out and kill one, and we killed them all. And we have in all mythologies stories about dragons, and what they were the dinosaurs. They survived. They survived the flood because of the Kent Hovind theories. The big dinosaurs were too big to put in an ark, but the little ones were little. And if you take a lot of eggs and run away before the dinosaur comes back, then you can have a lot of them to just have them reproduce when you come out of the ark. We have stories. The most recent one that I heard was like 3 or 4 days ago of animals giving birth not only without a mate, but being male too, inside zoos. The latest one that I heard was like 5 or 10 days ago, and it was python, and it gave birth to 14 little pythons. So that you would call a Darwinian mechanism. I would call uh, a miraculously brilliant mechanism of the survivability of the species. I know it sounds more complicated, more words, but the species has to have a way to survive if it cannot find a mate. And the previous one I heard was a female crocodile giving birth without ever meeting a male inside the cage of a zoo. So we have these things that people can call Darwinian. I agree. He discovered, he at least put them down on paper, right? So let's call them Darwinian because he discovered them. But the Darwinian theory overall is the common ancestry, and that I have a problem with. So I know I gave you too much. So
I understand that. That's not. I don't mean to reiterate this point, but that's not really what this discussion is about. This discussion is for us to explain how far that we believe those limitations are. So the reason I gave the example of Archaeopteryx is if I were to name any species to you that appeared to possibly be a transitional species, would you always come back with the same answer that it must be some other created animal?
I guess so. I guess every time you give me a fossil, I can say that I don't know if that fossil gave birth, and to suppose that that birth led to another birth, and it led to another birth, and led to the birds that I have today. If it was about a bird, let's say, or a dinosaur bird.
Because you believe that that would be too far. You believe that would extend the principle too much grace to operate in nature.
It makes it. It has assumptions built in by saying it. It is an assumption. So why am I wrong in doing that? Science means I found the fossil. Saying if that fossil gave birth, it's an assumption. Saying that that birth gave another birth to another birth to another birth and led to the kind that I have today, it's a set of assumptions. So why am I wrong? Why do you think that is far-fetched?
I'm just trying to understand exactly why you believe that. Because, the selective breeding that we've done as human beings over, just the last few thousand years has been so extreme and so successful that we could not possibly pretend to know right now what the limits of biology are. People breed for things they want. They don't breed to push the boundaries. If people want toy poodles, they breed with certain traits in mind, but they don't breed to see how small they can possibly make a dog.
Oh, Christian brother, don't think that they haven't tried it.
Well, my point was that they've been quite successful. The span of dog sizes and shapes and morphological variations has been so great and probably so much more than they ever would have expected in the very short time that we've been breeding dogs. You know, people used to think that dogs were a combination of foxes, coyotes, and wolves, but in the light of modern genetics, we now know that all bred dogs are just wolves. They're Siberian wolves. And so when you look at the smallest Chihuahua, teacup poodle, Shih Tzu, whatever, up to the largest English Mastiff or Great Dane or whatever, all of those are Siberian wolves, 100%. Why do you think that does not validate Darwinian theory?
Because it can never crossbreed, and don't think
Darwinian theory doesn't say that species would crossbreed.
Darwinian theory goes to the common ancestry. It's not just the mechanisms. It's not just natural selection. We can breed and create the Jack Russell and use DNA of a fox to achieve it, and it works. But we've done other experiments, and we see that crossing after a specific line that has to do with the distance that the animals have, it doesn't work. Like a man can never, the sperm of a man can never work with the egg of a monkey, even a gorilla. It never works. But don't think they haven't tried it. And I'm actually sure that they, in the pre-flood world, maybe they have been more successful on it and have created what remained to be called chimeras. Is that how you pronounce that? Chimera. Chimera is the Greek one, but I think chimeras, which is crossbred animals, monsters that come between two animals. But today we see the limitations of those, and we cannot create them. But don't think that there are some seriously sinister scientists out there that haven't tried it. They have.
Let me ask you a question, just a hypothetical question. If people were to start breeding dogs strictly for their height or their bone density or things that make them larger, if that was the sole purpose and it was selected only for size, what do you believe the limitations of the dogs would be?
I do not know where it is, but the limit is there. You can never make one as the size of a building.
Do you think it could reach a horse?
No,
Why?
I think it's smaller than that.
Do you think it could reach an elephant?
No, I said already smaller than a horse. So
You don't think that a dog could become the same size as a horse?
I think the grain tan is like the biggest size they can get.
Why do you think that?
Because they've tried. Don't think they haven't tried to make them
No,
even
I
bigger.
think they haven't tried.
No. I actually think that you are born inside a world where like almost everything has been tried by very, very sinister scientists.
Do
Now,
you think it's sinister to selectively breed for things like that?
no, there are elements of our experiments that have a complete lack of ethics. So when you try for something and it doesn't work, you still brought a soul, not a soul. You brought a living creature that cannot survive and it has to be put to death.
I want to go back to the horse thing for just a second, if you don't mind, because
give me a second. Give me a second.
Go ahead.
First off, I want to show this. There is this tendency around when I say some things that people are like that's not true, that's not true, that's not true, and just because I said this, I want to bring up this. Can you share my screen?
Logan, please share the screen. Thank you.
But I tried already to translate it through Google Translate, and it will not translate the whole web page. But I'm gonna take the title for you, and I'm gonna copy that and put it on Google Translate. All right?
Okay.
Do we read? Do you see this?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm copying the title here, and I'm gonna now go to Google. This is the translated webpage. It just doesn't work. So I'm going to Oh, I could just click on the Google Translate. What? All right, I'm gonna click here, and now I'm gonna paste the title here, and it's translating it, and it said Brazilian boas gave birth to 14 babies. Boas, it shouldn't be boas, but there is another way, another name. I don't know why it doesn't know the name. It's not python. It is another snake. Um, I'm not sure how they're called. Do you have this word boa?
Boa, yeah, boa is a type of constricting snake.
So yeah, then it did the job correctly. So it gave birth to 14 babies without a partner. What the title doesn't say is that it's also a male. So that is very, 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 very shocking to the things that we understand. This is not possible. Yet here it is. It can happen. Last time I heard about this was with a crocodile. That one was a female, but it gave birth being locked in a cage. So there are mechanisms that have been implemented, like and we discovered them, but that doesn't go all the way back to connecting and cross speciesism, right?
Oh, yeah. Can I take the floor for just a second?
Yep, yours.
So I want to back to this horse thing. There are species of dogs, for instance, like Irish dogs or Great Danes or English Mastiffs that are very, very large. And there are species of horses like Shetland ponies that are very, very small. And the biggest dogs are about as big as the smallest horses. So
No,
why would you not believe that those lines could be pushed even further? I don't understand why you're imposing this.
there is a limit, but
But I'm just asking you why you think the limit is so conservative.
okay, wait. First off, the Great Dane is way bigger than the pony, the English pony. Way bigger, like double, like triple, right? The Great Dane, I don't know if you've seen the English pony, how small it is. Like I pet one and I had to bend down to 1/3 of my size to pet the
But
horse.
Achilles, that's just making my point.
I know. I'm just continuing on telling you that no, actually, the Great Dane is 3 times the size of the pony.
Okay.
Still, so but the dog has a limit. I don't know if that limit is exactly at the size of the normal horse, but it sure exists. And
Can
don't
I ask
think
a question?
that there aren't people that haven't tried to make it even bigger.
Let me say one more thing, Peter, and then I'll open up the floor if you don't mind.
Okay.
Achilles, all of biologists believe that animals have a limitation. They can sort of calculate the potential limitations based on physics, but they can also estimate the realistic limitations based on the history of life and the things they've observed. So everybody who works in the field of biology acknowledges that you're not going to have horses as big as the moon. That's not really a real thing to say. The question is, why do YEC proponents feel the need to draw those limits so conservatively when we seem to observe things like the horse and dog situation that are much more liberal than you guys would have liked to admit?
I don't know. I don't relate to all the young Earth creationism. All right, I'm a newborn in young Earth creationism, so there are things that I agree with. There are things I disagree with. There is certainly is a limitation. We can never make a dog being as small as a mouse. There is a limit to the size. That's for sure. Now,
How do you
where
come
the,
up with that limit? Why do
where
you
that
say mouse is the limit? Like that's what I'm trying to figure out.
I
Do
don't
you
know.
think
It's true.
because
It's
a mouse is a rodent and a dog is a canine?
Yeah, but it's you that brought it up. The
No, I'm
limits,
interested. I'm
the
interested.
limits discussion. It's not even like you're saying. Why does it matter that much? I don't even know. You're the one that brings it up.
Well, there is a reason. What I'm saying is a mouse is a rodent and a dog is a canine. So I'm assuming that you believe, for instance, that rodents were especially created separately from canines.
Yep.
Do you think that like the rodents have some span of limit and then the canines have some different overlapping span of limit?
Which we just proved with a horse and a dog, right?
Well, we proved that whatever it is, it's liberal.
And it is, yeah, the dog can be bigger than a horse if you take the biggest dog and the smallest horse. Yeah. Right?
But can a dog, because we know these limits have already been pushed as far as they have, can a dog continue to be selectively bred as large as the largest horse?
So let's say you have two great dams and they give birth to 10, and one of them ends up being an inch bigger than the other. And you search for another one and you all do the same with the other family and you get the one that has 1 inch bigger and you crossbreed those two. So you are picking the one that had the highest size for a gene. Okay. Do you think that you can actually get them to become much bigger by following that process for a long like set of births?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out is like the people who impose the strict regulations on this are the young earth creationists. Like I don't have an opinion about this. I don't know how large a horse can be or how small a horse can be. You guys seem to have strong
Can I
opinions
help with that?
and not be a certain size.
I can help with that.
Please, Peter, go ahead.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah. So Achilles, how much bigger do you think corn is than grass is? Is it 10 times bigger? 100?
I'll accept that, but yeah, I'll say, I don't know, 30 maybe. Depends on
Okay.
when you mowed your lawn, you know?
So and you accept corn exists?
Yeah.
Okay, so
It didn't.
through
before.
evolution, since that's what we use to create corn from grass, we can get things that are 30 times bigger than the original species. So you just accepted that can happen because
Oh,
that's what we did.
okay.
Corn is created by humans. It comes from a type of Mexican grass.
When?
When?
Yeah, when did we create that?
Go on Wikipedia. I don't know when we created that. I know we created it.
No, because I'm wondering, because the world didn't have it, and when we discovered,
We didn't discover corn. We
can you let
created
me finish?
corn.
Yeah, thank you. When we discovered the Americas, corn was introduced to the rest of the planet. So
Because it
who
was
is it?
created by the Mexicans. Yes,
So it was the Native Americans that created it.
Mexicans. Yes.
Yeah, Native Americans of Mexico. Okay. So
Americans of Mexico. I didn't know Mexico was United States.
I said the Americas. The Americas is, much bigger than the United States. It includes all the way from Canada to Chile. Chile,
Okay. No,
right?
never mind. But
So-
that's kind of deflecting
that's
from
not-
what I just said. So
It's
we
not
know
deflecting.
for a fact.
I'm just
Hold
saying
on.
that you're implying that we
We
did
know
this.
for a fact that humans created corn.
And
Corn
what
is
is that?
30 times bigger than grass. So
Right.
when we go back to Christian's example, where I thought it was Mesohippus that he used,
Yes.
that was an ancestor of horses. Not only do we have the complete line of how horses evolved into modern horses, but yeah, it can get bigger. There's no size limit to evolution. It depends on the body structure of a particular animal, how big it can get, because horses obviously will never get as big as elephants because they don't have the bone structure for it. But yes, that can happen.
All right.
And we know this.
Thank
And
you.
we know
Thank you
this
for
because
your intervention.
because we have all the evidence. literally
Sure.
everything that leads up to it.
Sure, we do. I am here to talk with Christian though, and as we were talking for the past
But
maybe
it's an open
maybe
panel now, isn't
yeah.
it?
Let me please finish.
If it's not gangster, just let me know, then I'll shut up.
So for the past at least hour, I've been looking into a book to find the quote that I've been looking for. That do you remember how far back I mentioned it, Christian?
No, honestly, I don't, Achilles. I apologize.
Yeah, it was almost the beginning. So I finally
I
found
did
it.
okay for Logan to open the panel. I should have asked you that first, Achilles. I apologize for that as well.
Yeah, I just noticed it in the private chat. I didn't, but it's okay. The thing is that I found the quote, and it is from Ernest Mayer of the Cambridge University, published in the Cambridge University Press of 2004, page 119. And he says, the earliest fossils of Homo rudolfensis and Homo erectus are separated from Australopithecus by a large unbridged gap. How can we explain this seeming saltation? Not having any fossils that can serve as missing links, we have to fall back on the time-honored method of historical science, the construction of a historical narrative.
Why are you looking for scientific facts in a book? Why aren't you going to scientific papers or scientific websites?
All right. Although Christian, this is a little far from our discussion because our discussion never went into the
But
real.
it's an open discussion now, Achilles. I'm asking you a question.
It still hasn't ended. All right. Can you wait?
No, it's an open panel now.
Yeah. You're like I don't have the rents to make it a closed panel again. I'm just pointing out to any viewer that was watching this discussion that this
I didn't know this was your channel. My apologies.
This point was brought up, and it is not what Christian believes. He doesn't believe that we go back to Australopithecus, okay? But I was describing back then my issue with the theory of evolution, and I said, I remember I read a quote somewhere, and I wanted to bring that up. So I just wanted to clear out that it's not that Christian claimed that at any point, but I just had to, my mind was stuck on bringing that quote.
No, I understand. And Peter, that may be my mistake. I might have been a little bit too froggy opening the panel.
No problem.
That could have been my mistake.
It's okay, and I don't mind.
I'm happy you did because there were a few things. I mean, so if you want to know what we can do with evolution, one of the best documented things is the silver fox experiment. A Russian guy tried to just breed less aggressive foxes and ended up with a new kind of domestic dog that isn't a domestic dog, which is a very interesting thing to study because they didn't set out to create dogs. They just wanted a silver fox. But the dog, the animal just got different colors, different kind of tail. The ears became floppy. It turned into what we know as a domestic dog. And this is just done by trying to mate less aggressive parents to get an animal that's not as aggressive to get the fur from. But the fur changed too.
I believe that.
So,
I believe that the fox relates to the dog. I believe
it got all kinds of things that we don't see in any fox anywhere on the planet. It got completely new traits.
Peter, I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
This is what you brought up as one of the more interesting things. That's one of my favorite studies, and it's been a while since I read through it. But one of the things that crossed my mind when I first heard about that was the idea that perhaps these dog-like traits were ancestral to all canines. Do you think that's a reasonable interpretation?
So no, because we know that the dogs we know came from the Asian wolf. So those traits were developed after, before that, we don't see animals that have those kinds of floppy ears, because floppy ears wouldn't be beneficial in the wild. The animal would need to have ears where it can direct them to locate sounds. So those ears wouldn't be beneficial in nature.
So you think it's just an example of the same mutation popping up independently?
Yes.
Okay.
It is. It definitely is. It definitely is. And that's what makes this experiment so interesting, because through that experiment, we found out that that there is a thing as convergent evolution. We see the same thing. We have different animals on different continents that look exactly the same, but are completely different animals. So I know the hedgehog, and I forgot the other two that look exactly the same, which aren't hedgehogs, which came from a completely different lineage.
Yeah, I'm familiar
but
with
look,
evolution. I just didn't know if you had
Yeah.
considered the idea that perhaps it was a reactivating of ancestral traits to all canines, because I'd heard somebody else mention that.
yeah, I haven't seen any evidence of any animal that has floppy ears, as I said, because it's not beneficial in the wild. In the wild, the animal would need to be able to pinpoint where a sound comes from, because it's a hunter, right? It's a carnivore. It eats meat, so it needs to hunt. Therefore, it needs to find its prey. So,
Okay. Can I ask Achilles a question?
go ahead. I've
Achilles?
interrupted too much already.
So Achilles, you believe that there was some sort of a basal dog that the dog breeds came from. Is that right?
I was muted and I was saying, BBM, please give me a second to bring up
Okay.
something which is on another browser. That's why I couldn't find it, to address this certainty that Peter came in with, which was about the corn. And immediately I'm getting to your question. So now I think I have it. Am I sharing? I am. So here, this is like the first search, and it talks about the origin of corn. It does say that we discovered it in Mesoamerica, and that the Native Americans of Mexico domesticated grass to become this. But
is it teosinte? Is that the grass?
But this teosinte at the left is the actual grass, and it was very different. And they did, by breeding, turn it into the corn that we have today. But let me zoom into the picture. You'll see that that's not the grass that Peter is implying. It's not the same. This is a big plant, and it did not change in size. What changed?
Hold on. What grass did I name?
You asked me if the difference of the grass is, let's say, 20 or 100 times smaller than the corn. Therefore, I just accepted that from corn we arrive, from grass we arrive to corn. So I bring up that is the.
I'm just asking you. So that is a grass. That is a grass. There are multiple different variations of grass.
I don't know if you want to call that grass. I call it a plant. Okay, it's big one. It's not grass.
It's not grass.
You implied that
a plant we know that is grass, according to you. Hold on, a plant that we know is grass, you now redefine and you say that it's not grass. And your qualifications,
it's right here.
Your qualifications are to do that.
Right. Look at the size. It didn't grow in size. It didn't become a bigger and different plant. It did have the same thing, which is what we call today corn, the same seeds, but by somehow interbreeding the different and going for bigger and bigger, they made it to this corn that we have today. But it didn't change from the grass you implied, because every viewer that can go back can see that you said, if I believe that grass, corn is much bigger than grass, therefore you laid out the theory that from grass we can go to corn, and that's trans species. No, it's not. It's the same, but we
I didn't say trans species. I specifically brought up this example that
That's
it
not the-
is within the same lineage, and that's what the change was. I didn't say anything about species. I
You
was talking about a lineage.
you asked me if the grass is shorter than corn, if corn is longer than grass. I said yes. You said how much? 10 times. I said maybe 20. You said maybe 100. I said yeah. And then you said, but did you know that it came from grass? So that's not the case. It's a misrepresentation.
It
Now, you
is the
might want
case.
to
You just showed
classify,
it. It's
you
on
might
screen.
yeah, you might want to classify that as grass, but that's not grass. It's a plant.
It's not. I'm not classifying that as grass. We know through the scientific method that it is a grass.
All right.
And
Okay.
the fact that you are probably not intelligent enough to figure that out, I mean, that's fine. But you don't get to redefine what a plant is if you're not qualified in the field to do that. If you want to say that it's not grass, great. Then whip up a scientific paper in which you state that teosinte isn't grass and why you think it isn't grass. Put it up for peer review and see what happens.
May I
Alright.
step in for a second, Peter? Is
Because
that
you're
all right?
going to fail.
Keep the ad hominems home where you
It's
are.
not an ad hominem.
me
You
step
are showing on screen a grass, and then
Which
you say this is not a grass.
Which completely disproved what you pointed out.
You showed on screen that I'm correct.
Right.
me step
Okay.
in.
Christian or BBM? Go
I
ahead.
just want to step in for just a second because I think this is a silly terminology thing. Peter,
It is.
Peter, do you believe or can you demonstrate that the plant on the left side was 30 times smaller than the plant on the right side?
I'm looking into it.
Because that's the
give
question,
me-
right?
Yeah.
The
BBM?
word grass is used colloquially to refer to a lot of the breeds of grass that we use for our lawns, but that's not
Just-
what that word means academically.
Yeah. This just for reference, maize and corn is a tall, stout grass. Just saying,
All right.
still a grass.
How big is wild teosinte, Peter?
Now,
I'm trying to look it up.
Because
we
that's
classify things, but we put the line where we want, and we say that that's grass too.
Well,
As
we're setting aside the word grass. We're just saying how large is wild teosinte compared to corn.
yeah, because Peter was very specific in pointing out the difference in size of the two, right?
But that's what he's looking up now to try to distinguish, like wild teosinte before it was messed with had a certain average range of size, and modern corn has a certain.
Okay,
average
so
size.
that's my bad. So it grows 6 to 13 feet.
Wild teosinte.
Yes.
Okay, and what is the range of modern corn?
Well, I'm pretty sure we have managed to
I
get
think
it higher.
it's about 6 feet, maybe
Okay, so what we would
7.
need- What we would need for this
Yeah,
principle to be established is an example of a plant that, when wild, is past a certain threshold of size to what is domesticated. So, if we're going to set that threshold at tenfold, whatever
You're
we choose
correct.
for that, you know,
You're correct.
I'm sure there are examples that we can discuss that may be a little bit more profitable here.
Anyway, BBM.
Yeah. So after the flood,
That's a
you
radical
think there?
change in
You
subject.
accept there was a basal dog that gave rise through selection to the various dog breeds, right?
For me, that's since yesterday. Just saying, because we had a flood yesterday,
Oh, geez.
and we don't even
Did you
have a
get
river.
Did you get through it?
There's
Okay.
no river. I did. Several others didn't. So
Oh,
we had rain in one day, and that amounted to an amount of water in which cars drowned completely.
wow.
You
Was
could
it
not
caused
even
by
see the roof. Yes. So that's the
Yeah.
amount of water that came down in my region yesterday.
Yeah, and it seems to be happening more and more.
It does.
Worldwide.
It's called climate change.
Yeah, I didn't ask how
Let
it's
me jump
called,
in
but
on the
I
grass.
know for sure that it looks like we should all have a boat in our house.
Yes,
Like
definitely.
nobody ever considered that as something like we have a fire.
We agree on something.
extinguisher. But
All right,
nobody
Achilles,
ever
we
had a
agree
problem.
on something. This is becoming dangerous. We
let's
agree on
focus
something.
here.
Yeah, let's find something to disagree on.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Victor.
Okay,
Days of
Achilles.
before the flood.
Achilles,
Yeah.
I've
I mean,
asked this
I'm
question
just
3
happy
times
that
now.
we agree on something. Go ahead,
Go ahead.
BBM.
Okay,
I'll shut
I
up.
think I asked the question. I'm just waiting for Achilles to answer.
Oh,
A quick answer.
yeah, as we said with Christian in our discussion, the lineage goes all the way back, but it just goes back parallelly, and it had two abrupt changes. One of them was the fall from creation, was the fall, so a lot of things changed then. And the second big abrupt change was the flood, where we lost a lot of variations within kinds, because Noah didn't take all the different dogs that
Okay,
existed.
so let's just say it was a wolf, right?
Right.
2 wolves. And so in the lineage from wolf to Chihuahua, can you tell me when the wolf gave birth to something that was a non-wolf?
We did that. Like we are.
When
the
did that
ones-
happen? When did that happen? Can you point out the exact time when a
Of course
wolf
not.
gave birth
No,
to a
no, no.
non-wolf?
Of course not. What I can tell you for
Okay.
sure is that we have the science today to interbreed things without having them to mate. Right.
So when Ken Hovind says dogs give birth to dogs, do you see how ridiculous a statement like that is?
No,
Because
because
we only saw wolves give birth to wolves, right?
the reason he's using that argument, and I kind of expected others to see it for what he's using it for, is because the narrative that is being pushed is that there is a common ancestor of things, and we all go back to common ancestry. And
No,
the way
he's
the
pushing the
way
narrative that these changes happen almost immediately within a generation or two, that something gives birth to something
no,
else, another
see, I
another
believe
creature.
no, I
And
believe he has,
I'm asking you when the first wolf gave birth to the non-wolf to become a Chihuahua. When did the first wolf give birth to the first Chihuahua?
first off, I don't think that let's say, with the assumption that Noah did take them on the ark, okay? I will admit and say it's an assumption, even though we have found the ark. But let's say it's an assumption. He did not only take the wolf. I think he also took the fox, or took dog and the wolf. And how we have arrived today to the Chihuahua has to do with the breeding that we have selectively done. Now we can even play with the genome. And I mentioned earlier the Jack Russell that has DNA of a fox. The Rottweiler has DNA of a lion. So we have been messing.
Really?
Yeah. We
The Jack
discovered.
Russell does not have DNA of
Somebody
a fox,
looked
because
those up.
the fox deviated from the lineage long before, so before it became a fox. So
No,
no,
I'm not saying it
they
happened on its
they
own.
do have the Jack I can't even
Jack
think.
Russell. Jack Russell.
Jack Russell does have DNA, similar DNA to a fox, because they're all dogs.
Not
Foxes
all
are
of it.
dogs, and
Not
dogs
all
are
of it.
dogs, and
Listen,
wolves are dogs.
the
Right.
history of the Jack Russell is that the British had a very big problem with rats in their what is it called? Oh man, Subway. Subway? Is it Subway? Or is it the sandwich? Okay, I think it's Subway. And there were a lot of pipes, and they could not get to the rats because they were going in the pipes. So they started interbreeding dogs to make them very small, but they still did not feel like hunting mice. And they solved that by adding the fox to the mix. Now, I don't know how,
They can't, because
but
they
in the
can't
DNA
add
of the Jack Russell, there are parts of foxes.
Okay,
And
I don't think that's true, but I want to get back to my point that you see my point that the changes are incremental and they're small changes. And something doesn't give birth to a non whatever.
okay, I see that point, and I raise it by telling you that if we let the wolf be, it would not create on its own the Chihuahua or the Great
Well,
Dane. It will
yeah,
always
but
be a
but
wolf.
but but you're saying that after the flood, these basal kinds evolved through what you call microevolution, but it's really macroevolution because it became the biodiversity that we see today. Millions of species that weren't on the ark. And so you're admitting that macroevolution occurred on a rapid pace after the ark, which was 4,000 years ago.
Well, you define rapid compared
4,000 years
to,
ago is rapid
yeah,
in
yeah, but you,
geologic time.
yeah, but you define that rapidness according
I
to
don't define it. We have the
wait,
time. I mean, we've
wait,
proven the time.
wait. Let me complete the
Go
sentence.
ahead. Go ahead.
You define rapid by the other alternative that you have, which is millions of years. Because
Yeah.
according to my theory, the way that they got many different variations of the same kinds before the flood was equally rapid to what it happened next. It's
Yeah,
the
but yours
same
isn't a
amount.
theory.
Well, it's the
Yours is
same
just
amount.
an idea. I mean, it's not even, it doesn't rise to the level of a scientific theory. It's not even close. It's not even a
That is
hypothesis.
your call. That is your call. But I'm just saying that
No, it's
you call it rapid.
it's science, Achilles.
You
It's not
call it
my, I'm not creating these terms and these definitions.
okay. But I just addressed the fact that you are calling something rapid in 4,000 years. For me, it is not rapid. 4,000
Because
years.
you reject science and you reject radiometric dating and every dating technique that we have, relative and absolute dating techniques.
Well,
You reject those out of hand.
they can start by working, and then I wouldn't be rejecting them.
They work the vast majority of the time, and we know the things that don't work, including some things about carbon dating, including dead carbon and these things that we understand perfectly. And we know how to collect samples to get good, valid dates. So
And
you're saying
discard
that
all
most of the
those
dating is wrong, but most of the dating is very consistent with what we find geologically in the geologic column and the
with all the
place in the
assumptions
geological. Go ahead.
in it, with all the assumptions that are embedded in the theory of how carbon deteriorates. We have so many assumptions in it, but we take them for like it's it was the same amount back then as it is today. That's an assumption. It was burning in the same rate that it's burning today. That's another assumption. But we can have another show and talk about the carbon dating
Sure.
methods on its own.
Thank you for answering my questions.
I'd
Somebody
like
else
to
can
jump
get
in
it.
on one of the points that you made, BBM, if that's all right.
Christian,
Sure.
Christian, can I jump in real quick because
Sure,
I
go
just
ahead,
looked
go
up the
Go
Jack
ahead.
Russell Terrier. Jack Russell Terrier at no point was interbred with some kind of fox. It came from the Parson Jack Russell Terrier and the Fox Terrier, and it also wasn't bred to battle rats. It was a dog that was bred to battle badgers because badgers live in holes, and they needed a dog that could get into the hole. So
All right.
none
Thank you.
none of the story you just told is correct.
Okay, I'll look it up too. But I thought it was about rats. But
No,
badgers.
badgers,
It's
which
okay.
are very much bigger than rats,
I do want to
which
jump
is
in.
why.
Yeah, I found one recently dead in my yard. I was very sad about it.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I want to jump in.
That was my thing. Go ahead, Christian.
Just one of the points that BBM had made that I think is an interesting point for people to consider. Achilles, do you estimate the global flood to be around 4,400 years ago? Is that about where you put it?
Yeah, that's what the Bible reveals. So I
Okay.
guess I
So
wouldn't have a problem with that. Yep.
No, sure. So I just wanted to confirm that before I went forward with this. So we know that there was a limited number of animals on the ark. We don't know. I don't know if it gives us the exact number of animals. I don't think that it does. But we know that there was a limited number of animals because there was a limited size to the ark. And when we look in the world today at the great variety of species and the great variety that exists in nature, then we have to concede, if we are young Earth creationists, that a limited group of species in the last 4,400 years has diversified into the millions of organisms that we see in the world today, the millions of individual species that exist today. That is a very, very rapid and active and accurate version of Darwinian theory. Version is probably the wrong word there, but it certainly proves Darwinian precedent that genetic variation comes through this process. You know, to say, like, let's say, for instance, there were 10,000 species on the ark. I don't know how many there were, but if there were 10,000, for those to diversify into the millions of species that we have today in 4,400 years, that's quite a bit of active Darwinian principle. Don't you agree?
I don't call it rapid. It's a long time.
Regardless of the time
If you
span, it's a very
start
active principle.
wait, if you start multiplying and have the births and then multiplying because the children, the offspring, are not gonna be 1 and 1, they're gonna be 10 and 10, and you start multiplying then with generations, you'll see that 4,000 years are not a long time, are not a rapid time. And yes, I do believe that this is where they came from, but it gave birth to all the types of different horses that we have today and all the different dogs that we have today, with the addition of what we interbred and created, right?
Okay, I have a follow-up part of the question, if that's okay. I know there's other people who want to get to questions. I have a follow-up part of the question.
Did I answer that? I mean, did you? Is that?
No, the time scale is not really what I was highlighting. I was just highlighting that we all believe that genetic diversity comes through the Darwinian principles. And my follow-up to that is this. The definition given in the book of Genesis for kind, the only definition given, is the ability to bring forth. And so we know that such speciation has occurred even in the YEC worldview since the landing of the ark, that the ability for two organisms that were once related or that come from a common ancestor can no longer breed with one another because of genetic drift. We know this is true. There's squirrels on both sides of the Grand Canyons, etc. The millions of species in the world today that you concede came from the limited number on the ark can no longer all interbreed with each other. So how do you reconcile that with your idea of the definition of kind, seeing that they can no longer bring forth, even though we know they are related?
They were different animals, and I believe that there could be some animals that found ways to survive the flood, and that's why the squirrels that you are describing are found in the two sides of the Grand Canyon. They did not come from the ark. They found a way to survive by finding lumps of trees that had clustered together. And when trees clustered together and they are chopped off from the root system that they had, they create a hydroponic system.
Achilles, that does not answer the question. They're both
wait.
Hydroponic system. That's breeding plants indoors. That's hydroponics.
Not on, yeah, we managed to do that, but the mechanism exists inside the plant. We did not invent it.
Hydroponics is putting up a tent inside your house with a specific lamp and creating a specific humidity. That's hydroponics.
Okay, no, hydroponics means having no dirt and having water underneath the plant.
Achilles, let me just jump in. The point is, you concede that they are both squirrels, but they cannot reproduce.
I personally have not looked into those specific squirrels. Last time this got mentioned, I said that one of them fell and then climbed the wrong side. and it started. But I didn't know they can't interbreed. I did not know that. I hear that first time today, so I'm not sure if that is the case. Maybe you can all verify that it is the case,
It is
because
the
I don't
case.
know that well.
Christian, I got another example that might be convincing.
But
Achilles,
to that,
do you think that
wait a
animals
minute,
can grow a completely
wait a minute.
different
The reason,
digestive tract?
wait a minute. The reason I brought that
Okay.
up with the plants is because I do believe that there are a lot of animals, small animals up to that size, that could have survived because of moving islands of plantation that survived the flood, and they created little ecosystems because of
Uh,
how a plant doesn't die once you take it off without cutting its root system. But if it is in the water and the water was not salty, it continued on sideways, and
you,
it clustered with
you do
others.
know
And the
you do
theory of flood says that there were little islands of
you do
ecosystems.
know that you're now saying that the God of the Bible is inept when he said, "I'm going to kill all animals," and that some animals escaped his killing and survived, which makes the God of the Bible look inept. Not only look inept, it would mean that he is inept. He
I
can't
don't know,
even do
man.
what he says.
Your theory says that the monkey swam all the way
I'm not talking about my
from the
theory. I'm
Atlantic.
talking about what the Bible actually says. The Bible says, "I'm going to kill all animals," and you said that he didn't succeed. That makes your God inept.
I think he
You
said
can't
that
have your cake and
I
eat
will
it too,
kill I will
Achilles.
kill all humans. I don't know. Christian can
Said all
verify that.
flesh. It's all flesh.
All
All
flesh,
flesh.
which means all animals. So according to you, your God is inept. Well, I'll take that.
Whatever you
As
say,
an
bro.
atheist, I'll take that.
Achilles,
Whatever.
I want to
Get to your point.
I want to get back to the meat of what my question was do you believe that genetic drift can get to a point where two related species can no longer reproduce? Do you believe that exists?
No, I don't know what's happening with those squirrels that you're using as an example, but I think that any kind will bring after its own kind. We can change that to be a lot different, but it can still interbreed with what it started with.
So do you
If
believe that
not,
teacup poodles and English mastiffs can breed?
if I take the sperm and the egg, yes.
Yeah,
You think that the
I have to agree
creature
with
is
Achilles on
responsible
this. All domestic dogs can still interbreed
to produce
chemically
viable offspring?
to
Yeah,
produce
I
viable
don't know
offspring.
if it's
Yes.
viable. I don't know if it's viable. It's gonna be
Yeah.
very weird. That's for sure.
No,
That
it's
viability part
viable
bothers me
because
really.
all
Your
domestic
question.
dog breeds belong to one species, which is the domestic dog.
Yeah, your question was whether they can interbreed. Now, whether that is
It's
viable,
No,
that's another problem.
my question was, do you
Christian.
believe that
Christian,
genetic drift is possible to the point where related organisms can no longer interbreed?
I said no,
Okay.
and it is getting very deep in a field that I wouldn't say I'm like a genius on.
Well, I'm not
Uh,
trying to pin you down. I'm just trying to understand where you put that line.
I do think that just as the example that we brought with the dogs, um, they will always be able to interbreed
A
with.
bad example is not indicative of all examples. You know, Peter mentioned teosinte, just he was remembering it wrong. But there are other plant examples that do make his point. So a bad example is not indicative of all examples. The question stands, is it
No,
possible for creatures who are related to drift to a point where they can no longer interbreed?
and I said that I don't. I think that that is not possible.
So you feel that
Um,
that is what violates the definition of kind because of the ability to bring
right.
forth. Right.
Yes,
So you
because
and I
the
understand
Bible
kind differently.
says
That means that you think kind means species.
that they will bring forth after their kind, right?
Yes.
So I do not believe that you can reach a point where you can have a different any kind, because I don't want to say horse.
But Achilles,
Or-
I can prove right now that you don't believe that.
By what?
Earlier, we discussed the millions of species on Earth today that you claim derived from the very limited species on the ark. So we know that this extreme speciation has occurred, and there are millions and millions of species that are all genetically distinct that cannot interbreed. And you have conceded that they came from a very limited number of species. That means that you do believe that that
Of
is
the same kind. What is it that you don't get, Christian?
because they can't breed anymore, Achilles.
Yes.
The-
You keep
even-
refining kinds.
even the pony can interbreed with the big horse if you get in the process, and as we did with the dog. with
Achilles,
the
there are
French-
millions of species, millions.
and
We can probably interbreed with great apes. So now what?
what do
We
you
are
mean?
great
Probably? Why? Have you seen that happening?
No,
We are classified as
our
great
DNA is similar enough that it is very likely possible that we can interbreed with other great apes. Yes.
If it was, they would have.
No,
Done
they
that.
wouldn't. They wouldn't
Our
because
our
it sounds
DNA,
kind of immoral.
Our DNA is similar
Why?
as you described. When we remove around 40% of the DNA, that's where the similarity is at the percentage that you are implying that it is. If we remove
Yeah.
a lot of it, that it's not.
Yeah,
similar.
we can remove even more if we remove all junk DNA. We can remove even more
So,
because we don't need it. We could remove that from the human DNA and we would be fine.
Christian, if
Yes.
there was, if there
You said
was,
something interesting,
cow-
Peter. Real quick, Achilles. I haven't said anything since I've been on here.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you
yeah,
said
but-
something interesting, Peter, that kind of struck my attention. You said it would be immoral for man to breed
Yes.
with great apes, and I was trying to emphasize
Someone-
that mankind is considered a great ape
Yeah,
for one.
I
and
said
also,
with other great apes. I
right, but
specified.
what would make that an immoral act? Why is it immoral? Because society
a
says
lot of-
so.
a
because
lot
it's
of
just
a lot of
gross?
people. Yeah. So
What about
I
people
think
that
I don't
don't see
think
it
I
that
don't
way?
think. Hold on. I don't think that if your daughter would choose to breed with another great ape, that you would be fine with that. You would think that that might be kind of immoral, kind
No,
of
of course, but I can
bestiality
explain
thing.
why. I can explain
Yeah,
why.
because it's bestiality, right?
Because God
which-
says don't do that.
There are a lot of things that God says that you shouldn't do, and people still do it.
Right, but that's my justification for not being okay with my daughter sleeping with another variation of a
I
great
agree.
ape.
I agree. I agree that it does say that in the Bible too. That
Well, the
doesn't mean
question
that it
with-
that's the only not even the origin of the fact that we consider that to be immoral.
I
Well,
think.
of course,
No, come
would
on.
be
We
makes
know,
sense because God
we
said
know
don't
it's
do it.
wrong because of more than that, Mark. You're not just going by
Well,
the Bible to think that's
Sure,
wrong.
but I'm asking specifically because Peter said it would be immoral. It's wrong because there
It
could
is.
be an introduction of all kinds of unpredictable genetic consequences into
Mark,
what would be
fix
a
your
sentient
mic.
It's
being
wrong
if
for
it's
the
possible.
animal. I mean, it's wrong
Right,
for
right.
the other
It would be
ape.
unfair.
The
for
animal
other-
the animal
exactly.
can't give consent. The animal can't
Right.
consent to this sexual act. Therefore, it's immoral.
You don't have to
Well,
go
It's
to
the
the
same thing.
Bible to find out that it's wrong.
It's literally the same reason why
The
we
cow-
consider having sex
Look.
with minors is considered to be immoral. They
The
cannot
cow can't
consent.
consent to being butchered. So how is that not also immoral?
It is
That-
immoral to a lot
because-
of people.
That is,
Okay,
yes,
wait a
it is
minute.
immoral,
Okay,
and
so
it's
to a lot of people,
it's also
it's back to
Technicality,
subjective morality.
technicality. Mark, you touched your microphone, and now we can hear you right. Something.
Can't hear me right? Okay, how about that?
no.
That's
The
better.
one touching the microphone was me. I bumped into it.
No,
My
it
apologies.
was Mark's, and I think now it was better.
how's
Now,
that?
No, I bumped into it.
what Mark
The sound
pointed
you
out,
heard was me bumping into it.
no, his voice changed.
Sorry about
No,
I
what-
know, but
what-
that wasn't the sound you heard.
oh,
That's what I'm saying.
okay, no, I saw him touching the microphone, and then immediately his voice changed. So he was, we can hear him better.
Yeah, this
before he
microphone's
touched-
extremely sensitive. I can move
I-
it
I-
just a little
I
bit
hate
and
to
it
say
changes a lot.
but I don't
And-
think
and-
there's any evidence that we
And
can
Mark has a
breed
voice
great apes.
changer, so there's that.
Okay, so what Mark pointed out is that if you believe that we are apes, why do you say that it's also immoral to mate with one? That is the question. It's very simple. If we are the same,
Consent.
Well, you could take that we're all chordates, so it's okay to mate with a fish. I mean, you could take that all the way down the line.
well, I've seen people trying to mate with a fish, and it's ugly.
Well, who was it that brought up
And with
that
goats, too.
that humans could potentially breed with other great
Yeah,
apes?
I don't think that's a fact.
I don't think it is either.
Peter brought that.
It
up.
is
I'm
not.
saying I brought it up because we know that the genetics are close enough that it would probably work. I didn't say it 100% worked. I
What you
said
say,
that according to genetics, according to modern day genetics, our DNA is very close to that of some of the other great apes. And the most likely candidate would be a bonobo,
what we are,
if
what
I'm
you're
correctly
saying,
informed.
what you're
And
saying.
we would maybe the whole consent thing wouldn't even be a thing,
By
considering
the way,
that
Christian,
bonobos
those are
just
the
used
those
sex
are the
as a
gay monkeys.
social thing. So
Christian Pike.
they might even consent to it. We don't know, but let's not try it.
We're back on the
That's
game
what I'm
bonobos.
saying.
All right,
Yeah,
So
let's
what
not go
establishes
try it.
morality is consent. I
And
would
that
agree
is
with that
also
between sentient beings, and I guess sentience isn't really a good word, but
No, because
other
bonobos
humans,
are
of
definitely
course.
sentient.
Oh yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Yeah, I believe what would dictate the morality of sexual actions between humans would be consent, but there is no consent in the animal kingdom, not even amongst the same type or species
No,
or kind,
just
whatever you
ask
want to say.
dolphins. Just
Yeah, they
ask
rape.
dolphins.
They rape.
They not only other dolphins, they rape humans.
Hmm. Yeah, I know that, and dogs will even try to rape humans. I mean, I've had even a female
Well,
dog
okay.
try to hump my leg.
Hey,
Yeah,
I think Achilles has to go. Achilles, did you want to make any final comments before you
Yeah.
go?
I was gonna say we're
that
probably
was
about to wrap it up.
a very interesting discussion. Thank
Achilles,
you,
before you go,
Christian.
I have
Thank
one
you,
question
TG.
that I would
Yeah,
really like to ask.
I just want to the only thing I want to point out is that where the discussion is now, I just want to point out that if somebody watching this looks into the similarities of the DNA that we have with an ape, they will see that in order to achieve that, we have discarded a lot of differences.
No, they
There
compare
are
the entire genome, and it's what, 98, 97%, the
90,
entire genome.
98%
of the
Yeah.
60% 60%
of the
BBN.
entire of the entire
The
genome.
entire genome.
We have removed 40%.
No,
and
no.
the remaining
When we say
60%,
entire genome, we don't remove anything because then it's not the entire genome.
well, that's why I'm calling the viewers to look it up, and they will see for themselves.
Yeah,
Give
they
us
can look it up.
give us a reference there.
I've told, we can do this on the Proverbs guys channel. I love doing that
Nah,
and showing it.
nah.
And
Nah.
I
Yeah,
will show
that's
you
gonna
there.
happen.
I'm not.
For now, I'm
I'm
gonna
not
let
going
the viewer look into it themselves, because for me, guys, it is 4:29, and I've stalled giving meds to a dog for 2 hours.
Okay, Achilles, I have one question for you. Can we do one question?
Yeah.
You might find this interesting. So, and it's closer to your home as well. So, do you think that animals can develop a completely different now I lost now I lost the word digestive tract, sorry. So where they can now feed on completely different food than they did before, but they needed completely new organs in order to do so. Do you think that's possible?
Now at the end of it, you ruined it. I would say yes. But then you said they need completely different organs of doing so.
They need new organs, yes. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, I don't know. I know that we just brought up examples of animals giving birth to their
Yeah,
own
but
kind
not that. But
without without a mate.
Can animals through evolution develop new organs so that they can get a new or a different digestive tract? That's a yes or no question.
I wouldn't know about it, but we just again, I'm repeating my response, which is that we've already shown here that we see behaviors that they do not make sense to us, like
No, I'm not talking about
an
behavior.
animal,
I'm
an
talking
animal,
about new organs.
yeah,
Can
an animal giving birth.
evolution provide new organs?
Did you watch this? That we've pointed out animals,
I'm still waiting for your
reptiles.
answer. That's a yes or no answer.
That is the answer. If you don't like it, the answer is that we observe mechanisms
Okay.
for the
The answer is
survivability.
yes. The answer is yes. And we've observed it in the Italian wall lizard. We placed it on a different island where it didn't have enough food. And within a few generations, within a few decades in human time, they developed new organs so that they are now a completely different animal. And we've watched this in real time.
All right.
You can look up the Italian wall lizard and see for yourself. This was without any human intervention, by the way. So there's no designer that made anything different. We just placed it on an island where there wasn't enough food.
You're
And that's
just
where
proving.
they
You're
evolved.
just proving with that what I would about to say, which you wouldn't let me finish. That we already presented here mechanisms that they do not make sense to us, but they exist in animals, which is to
Yes,
give birth,
which would go
become
against the fact,
to
which would
become
go against the
hermaphrodites.
fact,
Peter,
which
are
would
you a
go.
grown up? Are you or a child?
I am. The
Then
point
stop.
that I'm
Let
trying
me
to make.
respond. Let me respond then.
Yeah, that's not the point I was
We
trying to
have
make. But
observed
respond.
animals giving birth to other animals without a mate, becoming hermaphrodites when they are not. We've seen that with
Only within specific animals. We've never seen that in mammals. We've never seen that in
but in the
tons
same
of different.
manner, it proves that the survivability has some mechanisms installed which might
Only in
be able to
reptiles.
change.
Only in reptiles.
And when the problem is the scarcity of food,
And in some
another
fish.
change would happen. But that is adaptability.
I'm just saying that when you say that evolution cannot create something new, cannot create a new animal, this is the perfect example that disproves your claim, which was a
For
claim you made earlier in the
Let the viewers-
conversation.
Let the viewers
Because
decide.
no, it's not, because you made that claim, and this claim we have observed that that's not the case. It's not a loss of something, it is a gain of something completely new that wasn't in the lineage.
Okay, Peter, you win. You asked the question and you gave the answer.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, thank you.
everybody, I'll see you next time. Thank you, Gangster and Christian. That was
Thank
a
you,
great show.
Achilles.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you for
Thank
joining
you
us.
for joining
I'll
us.
see you next
everybody.
time. Have a great time and night. And I hope every viewer enjoyed this. Thank you, Peter, for your input.
Anytime.
I'll see
Anytime.
you soon, guys. Take care.
Thank you, Achilles.
Thank
I want to thank you, Christian, for providing for a very, very entertaining conversation.
It was that.
Although we do still disagree on a few minorities, but I think you did a stellar job.
I also don't like the minorities, Peter, mainly the Moldovans. I do want to say one thing.
Hey, I'm a minority.
Yeah, but I
I'm
hate
a
those
boomer
Moldovans.
who can do tech.
Look, I want to say something. I hate to say it after Achilles left, but I don't think he'll be mad at me. I made an extreme claim to him the other day while we were on the private chat that I intended to prove today during the public discussion. That claim was, Achilles, I believe that you and I believe the same thing in regards to this subject. And he thought that was a very extreme claim, and I intended to prove that. Now, for the sake of the audience, I asked Achilles, do you believe that Charles Darwin discovered the principle of natural selection? He said yes. I said, do you believe that natural selection is a mechanism that is active in nature? He said, yes. I said, do you believe that it leads to biodiversity? He said, yes. I said, do you believe that speciation has happened since the ark? He said, yes. Really, everything on the level of principle that I approached him with, he had to concede really did happen. So I want to make that point because my statement, though it sounded extreme, was not really extreme. Because in practice, most people are Darwinians without even realizing.
Yeah, exactly. The problem is, at least the problem I found that we have with young earth creationists is that once you get them to agree to this and then come up with specific examples, they will then disagree and will start redefining speciation. They will do everything to get out of it. But I agree. Even Kent Hovind agrees with speciation. Kent Hovind agrees with natural selection. He agrees with everything he tells people doesn't exist.
No, I've had that.
It's a thing.
I've had that
It's a
discussion
thing.
as well. You know
Yeah.
what me and Achilles were supposed to be discussing was what does the Bible say and what would violate that. That was supposed to be the discussion. And what I proposed was that anything that violated the boundary of kind, as it is described in Genesis, would be the magic line in the sand, so to speak. Now, the problem I have with YEC people is they often use the word kind interchangeably with species, which is not the same way the scriptures use it. The scriptures use it as these very broad, overarching categories of biology. And so, if you wanted to say that there was a Darwinian principle that violated the scriptures, you would have to say that that magic line was between these kinds that are described in Genesis. And as long as we're pretending that kind means species, we can't even have that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is a thing. I mean,
To believe in speciation is the same thing as believing that bringing forth after their kind does not mean what people seem to say that it means on the surface. Those are the same things. Otherwise, only one of those two things can be true. Now, what I proposed was that statement, bringing forth after their kind, had to do with the ability that whatever the created organisms were, the ability they had to adapt and change and continue on. Like you would say that this is still this because it descended from this, and this is still this because it descended from this. I was arguing that that's really what that statement meant, but we never had the chance to kind of zero in on that, unfortunately. Not that I expected to, but it's what was more interesting to me, rather, was to try to see where he puts that magic line, because most creationists don't know where they put it. They've never challenged themselves. That's why I was doing the horse versus dog example, because we know that the line between one-toed ungulates and canines, as far as their sizes, has already been surpassed. So if they want to impose this boundary and say, well, horse is the largest that a dog can be, or dog is the smallest that a horse can be, then you have to explain to me why you're imposing that boundary, because the Bible has nothing to say about this.
Mm-hmm.
That's really it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's sometimes it's frustrating when you talk to young earth creationists about this topic, because while they will agree on certain points, they will then disagree later, and it's really problematic.
Well, the example I started out with, of course, was Myohippus, because the reason I used that example is because Ken Ham has a Myohippus exhibit in the Ark Encounter, which means that the most prominent YEC organization in the world concedes that one-toed ungulates descended from three-toed ungulates. So when you concede that, you are conceding macroscopic morphological change. There's nothing microscopic about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't understand why that's not something that kind of strikes them like a bolt of lightning. You know what I mean? Like, to me, to concede that the foot can do this is conceding macroscopic change. Mm-hmm. I don't understand why they don't see it that way. I don't understand why people can say, well, we only believe in microevolution, but we also believe that an animal's foot freaking did freaking this. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I just don't get it. It's kind of frustrating for me, because it's like, man, There is nothing in the scripture whatsoever that says that life cannot adapt to a changing environment. And if you want to speak about the brilliance of creation, any kind of intelligent designer would create life with the ability to be malleable. So to me, even their approach to Darwinian principles is wrong, because they should embrace them as a highlight of creation if they're going to approach it from that angle, because it would be very foolish to create organisms that were so static that any changing conditions would cause them to go extinct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
I mean,
I don't know, Peter. I don't know.
I noticed you're visiting me.
Huh?
I was thinking, so earlier you were outside, now you're inside. I know where you are.
I'm actually still outside. It just got darker.
No, you're in there.
Oh, correct. I'm in there. That's right. Yeah. What you guys are seeing in Peter's screen is me.
See?
Right.
See?
That's also why I'm wearing this very white shirt, as you can see.
Well, we can't see the color of your shirt because it's dark. I have light, so there.
Oh, there's a very interesting comment that I just saw from someone named Gorgeous. Ken Ham has a wrong example, which is not proof of anything. That's a very good point. The only reason I brought that example up is because Ken Ham, being as influential as he is, I wanted to know if Achilles agreed with that example. So I asked him in the beginning, do you also, like Ken Ham, believe that Myohippus could be the ancestor of modern one-toed ungulates? So I wasn't saying that Ken Ham was correct. I was trying to determine whether or not Achilles conceded that point as well. And at first, it sounded like he sort of considered it as a possibility. But later on, I think when he thought about it more, he realized that he didn't believe that. So perhaps Achilles did not agree with Ken Ham about that. Peter made an excellent point that there are quite a few transitional species that lead us to believe that Myohippus is, in fact, the ancestor of modern one-toed ungulates.
Yeah, it's pretty well documented.
It is. It's one of the better chains that we have, for sure.
Yeah.
So thank you, Gorgeous, for pointing that out. You are correct about that. That does not make it a good point. But if you go back and listen, you'll see that I asked Achilles at the beginning if he also accepted that example. Now, one of the things that Achilles did that I sort of expected, but I think also shuts down the conversation, unfortunately, is I said, what are your thoughts on things like Archaeopteryx or Microraptor, or things that seem to blur the line between dromaeosaurs and birds? And he had two answers. Answer number one is that they're fake. And answer number two is that if they're not fake, they're especially created things that are not related to either one or both of those categories. Well, the problem is that when you have that response to every single example of a potential transitional species, there's nothing left to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way the cookie crumbles, Peter.
Yeah, I mean, my whole problem with people, and this is what Achilles also demonstrated, my biggest problem is that when they are looking for the science behind something, they go to magazines and articles, and they never go to a scientific website or even scientific papers. And I think that's where the problem lies.
Yeah.
It's and that it's just sad because people could learn so much if they were just willing to.
No, and the subject is so interesting. It's one of the things that
It is.
frustrates me about a lot of creationists, and I am a creationist, so I'm saying this as a creationist. But
And
the thing that
I
frustrates
agree
me
with
is
you.
to be more
I agree
interested.
with you on one thing, that if evolution is true, and God would have created evolution, that would make him a much more powerful and much more intelligent God than the God that the young Earth creationists believe in.
Well, I feel the same way about gravity or anything else. You know, to me, from a creationist perspective, or at least from my creationist perspective, every time that we learn more about the natural world, we inherently learn more about the mind of God. And as I often remind people, Charles Darwin did not invent natural selection. He simply discovered, he observed it and documented it. And so it was no different than gravity or germ theory or anything else. It was one more major breakthrough that we made about understanding the natural world, which from my perspective is a breakthrough in understanding our creator and understanding the mind of God. And so I accredit God with the brilliance of the malleability of life in the same way that I accredit him with celestial mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand why they don't see it that way. You know what I'm saying?
As I said, I agree with you on that point. Obviously I still don't believe that a God exists. That's where we differ.
I understand.
But I do not see the problem to accept the science we know is accurate. That's my problem.
Yeah, well, the
And
whole thing with Achilles was he and I, like I said, we were supposed to be discussing what the scriptures say and what could violate the scriptures. That was supposed to be the subject matter. And
Mhm.
he kind of got off on, in my opinion, a rabbit trail with the whole public school thing because I am not in defense of the public school system. So you're fighting against a straw man. You know, I didn't come here to advocate for public teachings. I came here to explain why I think that Darwinian theory is true, and why I think that only certain examples could potentially violate the scriptures. They give examples like the idea that a horse and a cow could be related as a violation of the scriptures. However, the categories in the book of Genesis are so broad and so overarching that surely horse and cow could fall under the same kind. So it would not, in fact, violate the scriptures.
Mhm.
So I don't know why
Yeah.
they don't see it that way. I guess I'm not sure, but I hope that Achilles and I can have a follow-up conversation, and maybe discuss this further because I like Achilles. He and I have rebuilt our friendship. We got on the rocks for a while, but we're doing better. And I think Achilles is a smart guy. I think that as much as YEC people accuse the world of programming and brainwashing, and I'm not saying there's not some of that goes on in the secular world, but there's also a lot of that goes on in their camp. And a lot of times they're guilty of the same thing. And when you're raised up from the time that you're knee high to a grasshopper to believe that Charles Darwin was the Antichrist and Charles Darwin was this and he was stupid and all this kind of stuff, that does not make you very objective in evaluating what he taught. And so that's the same thing that they're accusing the secular world of. When he started saying, well, Charles Darwin had an agenda, he had this, he had that, that has nothing to do with the subject. The subject is, was he right? I don't care what his motivation was. Was he right? That is the subject.
Yeah. Yeah, and can we demonstrate it? Because obviously he was also wrong about a couple of things. He wasn't right about everything, but that was because he didn't have all of the evidence that we have today. So there are still things that Darwin got wrong, which
Sure.
is my main objection from people calling people who accept evolution Darwinists or talk about Darwinism, because that's not a thing. It's not anymore. Darwinism was a thing when there was a competing idea back in the day, and I keep forgetting the guy's name, who had another mechanism, and that turned out not to be accurate. But that's where the
I know
term
who you're
Darwinism came.
that guy that, what was his name? I can't remember his name, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. We shall look that up, and we will tell you in another episode.
I actually talk about him sometimes because he was very interesting. Lamarckian evolution.
Lamarckian evolution, correct. I don't know why I can't remember that name, because I'm always struggling when I talk about this. But then I'm a minority. I'm a boomer. I'm old. So I have an excuse.
Well, I would like, for the sake of the audience, to say that it is true that there are some things within Darwinian theory that could potentially violate the book of Genesis. That is true. But the things that are often proposed as violations are not, in fact, violations. And the word kind, as it is used in the early chapters of Genesis, is much broader than YEC proponents often use it. And it is very obviously a reference to overarching categories of biology, not to individual species. Speciation does not violate kind.
And in all fairness, the book of Genesis doesn't say which kinds were created.
It only mentions a very, very few categories.
Yes. So,
Okay, Achilles is making the point that he has an issue with public schools teaching common ancestry, and he was saying that in Greece they don't do that, and in America they do. Obviously, I don't know about Greek public schools, and that's not a subject with which I'm super educated. My children do not go to public schools. Maybe that's a conversation for a different time. All I was really interested in was, where does Achilles draw the line of biological possibility as far as changing and adapting? What does he consider macroscopic change? And how close is that to where I draw that line? And I'll be honest with you, I know that maybe you wouldn't agree with this, Achilles, but I feel like when people go back and review this discussion, when we got into the details of those points, you and I are not that far apart.
mhm. Oh, and when you mentioned that you had a very white shirt on, it's not white.
That's closer to what I actually got.
See, I can do magic on
I like it.
screen. I mean, even Mark Stoney agrees because he's right there with you. See,
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate your support. I often invoke Mark without his permission. You know, I'll say things like, just like Mark Stoney said, and then I'll sort of make something up to get a point across. So I use Mark sort of at my leisure.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. I do the same thing with this guy. Him.
I would like to speak to Mr. Arn again sometime. I really enjoyed our conversation.
I really like that conversation, and I know for a fact that Arn liked that conversation.
He's a funny guy.
And
He's very intelligent, and he's
and
a
why
great.
do I know this? And why do I know this? Because he stuck around longer than an hour.
He did, yeah, he
If
did.
he hates the conversation, he will still give you an hour because
Yeah.
of out of courtesy and because he agreed to come on. If you annoy him, then he will leave earlier. That has happened with a flat earther. But if he enjoys the conversation, he'll stick around longer, even though 9 out of 10 times he doesn't even have time to do that. And I think he made it past an hour and a half with you.
I don't remember exactly what it was. It was longer than I expected. I do remember that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can read Arn's body language too, so I know for a fact that he enjoyed the conversation.
He's quite a good teacher. You know, I first was introduced to him quite a while back, and I think I had mentioned to him that I watched his 50-part series on the history of life a couple of times all the way through, and it struck me immediately that his calling in life is to be a teacher. You know, I know that he does a lot of debates and stuff, and I'm not saying that he's bad at that. I'm sure he's very talented, but I think that where he's best used is in the field of teaching, and he certainly seems to have a heart for teaching. You know,
Yes.
I admire that personally.
And what blew me away, what blew Arn away as well, is that some of the people who have a PhD in the field of paleontology consider him to be an equal because of his knowledge of the matter. Yes, he was invited to South Africa on a dig with a couple of paleontologists, all of whom had a PhD, and they invited Arn, and he was in their conversations treated as an equal because of his knowledge of the topic. And that to him was, I think, a lot of vindication for the work that he put in. But it still was one of the biggest compliments he's ever gotten in his entire life. So. And I mean.
Well, I guess I'm going to jump off here. I do want to say one closing remark for anybody who's still listening, who's interested in the subject, especially as it relates to Christianity. I say that much of what you've heard about biology and Darwinian theory has been framed and presented in such a light that you never had the opportunity to consider the implications of it spiritually and to consider the beauty of what it adds to the world in the same way that gravitational theory adds to the world. And I would ask you to go back and take another look at it and, kind of like what Peter said, consider how it improves the view of an intelligent creator to incorporate this ability that we already know is true into his creation. You know, biodiversity is I gave an example to Ryan a long time ago about the Hawaiian Islands that I think is a very good example, because young Earth creationists tend to believe that if you can look at something through a process, then somehow God didn't do it, as though he is not the God of processes. But the Hawaiian Islands are young enough that we understand quite a bit about how they came into existence. And what I asked Ryan, I said, Ryan, do you not therefore give God the glory for the Hawaiian Islands just because we know a bit about the process that brought them into existence? Don't we also believe that God is the God of processes? You know, so I just think that the idea that because you know the process that led to something, that somehow that takes away from the creative ability behind it. I don't think there's anything in the Bible to make you think that way. I think that you were told to think that way by a very niche group of theologians who have misrepresented what the word kind means in the book of Genesis.
And another thing, it's also documented that young Earth creationism drives especially kids out of the church.
Yes.
So keep that in mind.
Gorgeous, I am a Christian. I don't know if you're referring to me or not when you said he, but I am a Christian. I am a creationist. I covered that at the beginning of the
you don't
conversation.
have to address me as gorgeous. You can just say Peter.
I'm actually a minister. I'm not just a Christian, but I'm actually a minister. I just got back today from preaching at a church 3 services over the weekend. So I'm very much a believer in Christ. So thank you guys for go
I'm
ahead,
not.
Peter. Peter's not.
I'm not.
Peter's actually a
No.
Buddhist, but thank you guys for joining us. I appreciate it. I'm sure that Achilles and I will have a follow-up. And if you guys have questions that were unanswered by myself or Achilles or even any of the panelists, please have those questions ready so that when we go live again, we don't lose those questions. Because I had hoped that Achilles and I could get to Q&A from the comment section, and that never quite got to where I wanted it to be. But let's do that next time. Let's get more Q&A. Q&A is the fun part. And I would like to declare myself the winner of not only this, but all debates that I've ever been involved in.
And one other thing, Christian, a very wise man that was on my channel quite recently. He's from Walla Walla, Washington, I think. He suggested that you and I should have a conversation, so we need to get ready and set that up sometime.
Sure. I mean, I know that me and you had actually discussed that once in the past.
Yes, and then a lot of things happened, and I mean, the past few weeks I haven't had time for anything. So, and the reason I'm here now is because I'm not tired, so I'm skipping a night because I have to get up early. So I thought might as well go and watch something interesting. And hey, look, Gangsta is live. So let's thank our dear friend Logan for presenting this to the public.
Oh, thank you.
Great
Yes.
job. Great job, Logan.
Oh, thank you.
Very good job.
Yes.
Well, folks, I'm going to hop off here. Thank you guys as always. And thank you, Peter, for contributing to the conversation. And you and I I'm sure we'll have a chance to get together soon.
We'll do that. I'll have to see when I have time, and then we'll definitely do that.
Take them easy.
And I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Catch you later.
Thank you, Logan.
Thank you, Brother Pike.
Logan,
Talk to you later.
thanks for letting me jump in and derail everything with my loud mouth. So apologies for that.
Joining us.
Okay.
Have a good day.
I'll hop off too. You
Bye.
too. Catch you later.
Catch you later.
Bye all.